An emperor once knelt beneath a canopy of war-torn skies, his thoughts drifting between the chaos of the battlefield and the quiet wisdom stirring within his mind. That emperor was Marcus Aurelius, a philosopher king who recorded his private reflections in a work we now know as the Meditations. Picture him by the flickering glow of a campfire, wrapping himself in a cloak of introspection, capturing insights that have outlived the rise and fall of dynasties. These pages offer a glimpse into a mind that struggled with the weight of power, the certainty of mortality, and the pursuit of inner serenity across centuries. These words have traveled through the corridors of time, guiding philosophers, warriors, and ordinary souls. Seeking a compass in tumultuous seas, the timeless truths call us to question our fleeting concerns, our obsession with external validation, and our tendency to abandon the present for the illusions of past regrets or future anxieties. Through each reflection, Marcus Aurelius urges us to stand firm in the face of adversity, to cherish our fleeting existence, and to cultivate a tranquility of spirit that endures beyond the noise. In each phrase, there's a gentle invitation to slip beyond the frenzy of ambition and rest within the moment's silent center. This is not an escape from life's challenges, but a reminder that genuine freedom grows from understanding what we can and cannot control. Perhaps we lie awake at night, our minds spinning with regret or dread. Marcus's words whisper that such obsessions serve no one. Instead, they counsel us to embrace what lies before us, accept our responsibilities with composure, and approach every new day with a calm readiness for whatever may come. Yet these insights don't speak only to grand philosophical dilemmas, they also address our most intimate struggles. When we feel alone or lost, the Meditations offer a voice that resonates with empathy, for even an emperor knew uncertainty, and music fear when we question our purpose. Those ancient lines remind us that we share a common spark with every living being, and that our lives, though brief, carry a significance defined by how we choose to act. In this sense, Marcus Aurelius becomes both a companion in the stillness of the night and a guide toward self-discovery. Drift gently between consciousness and rest, letting these reflections guide you. Let the candlelight of antiquity illuminate your thoughts. Each sentence invites you to surrender the burdens of the day and slip into a gentler space of acceptance. There is no need to chase the world outside these pages. It will keep spinning here in the hush of your mind. You're free to embrace the truths Marcus once held close. Take a breath, release what you cannot hold, and sink gently into the promise of renewal that sleep brings. Consider each word a stepping stone across your restless mind, guiding you toward that calm center where worry dissolves. Surrender to the wisdom of an emperor's midnight reflections and awaken to clarity and music. Music. Peace Book 1 from my grandfather Varus. I learned good morals in the government of my temper from the reputation and remembrance of my father modesty and a manly character, from my mother piety and beneficence and abstinence, not only from evil deeds, but even from evil thoughts, and further simplicity in my way of living, far removed from the habits of the rich, from my great-grandfather not to have frequented public schools, and to have had good teachers at home, and to know that on such things a man should spend liberally, from my governor to be neither of the green nor of the blue party at the games in the circus, nor a partisan either of the Perarius or the Scarus at the gladiators' fights. From him, too, I learned endurance of labor, and to want little, and to work with my own hands, and not to meddle with other people's affairs, and not to be ready to listen to slander from Diognetus, not to busy myself about trifling things, and not to give credit to what was said by miracle workers and jugglers about incantations and the driving away of demons and such things, and not to breed quails for fighting, nor to give myself up passionately to such things, and to endure freedom of speech, and to have become intimate with philosophy, and to have been a hearer, first of Bacchus, then of Tassus and Marcianus, and to have written dialogues in my youth, and to have desired a plank bed, and skin, and whatever else of the kind belongs to the Grecian discipline from Rusticus, I received the impression that my character required improvement and discipline, and from him I learned not to be led astray to sophistic emulation, nor to writing on speculative matters, nor to delivering little hortatory orations, nor to showing myself off as a man who practices much discipline or does benevolent acts, in order to make a display and to abstain from rhetoric and poetry and fine writing, and not to walk about in the house in my outdoor dress, nor to do other things of the kind, and to write my letters with simplicity, like the letter which Rusticus wrote from Sinuessa to my mother, and with respect to those who have offended me by words or done me wrong, to be easily disposed to be pacified and reconciled as soon as they have shown a readiness to be reconciled, and to read carefully, and not to be satisfied with a superficial understanding of a book, nor hastily to give my assent to those who talk overmuch, and I am indebted to him for being acquainted with the discourses of Epicus, which he communicated to me out of his own collection from Apollonia. I learned freedom of will and undeviating steadiness of purpose, and to look to nothing else, not even for a moment, except to reason, and to be always the same in sharp pains on the occasion of the loss of a child and in long illness, and to see clearly in a living example that the same man can be both most resolute and yielding and not peevish in giving his instruction, and to have had before my eyes a man who clearly considered his experience and his skill in expounding philosophical principles as the smallest of his merits, and from him I learned how to receive from friends what are esteemed favors without being either humbled by them or letting them pass unnoticed. From Seius, a benevolent disposition, and the example of a family governed in a fatherly manner, and the idea of living conformably to nature and gravity without affectation, and to look carefully after the interests of friends, and to tolerate ignorant persons and those who form opinions without consideration. He had the power of readily accommodating himself to all, so that intercourse with him was more agreeable than any flattery. And at the same time he was most highly venerated by those who associated with him, and he had the faculty both of discovering and ordering in an intelligent and methodical way the principles necessary for life. And he never showed anger or any other passion, but was entirely free from passion, and also most affectionate, and he could express approbation without noisy display, and he possessed much knowledge without ostentation from Alexander the Garian to refrain from fault-finding, and not a reproachful way to chide those who uttered any barbarous or solosis or strange-sounding expression, but dexterously to introduce the very expression which ought to have been used, and in the way of answer, or giving confirmation, or joining in an inquiry about the thing itself, not about a word or by some other fit suggestion from Fronto, I learned to observe what envy and duplicity and hypocrisy are in a tyrant, and that generally those among us who are called patricians are rather deficient in paternal affection, from Alexander the Platonic, not frequently nor without necessity to say to anyone or to write in a letter that I have no leisure nor continually to excuse the neglect of duties required by our relation to those with whom we live, by alleging urgent music occupations from Catullus, not to be indifferent when a friend finds fault, even if he should find fault without reason, but to try to restore him to his usual disposition, and to be ready to speak well of teachers, as it is reported of Domitius and Aldoas, and to love my children truly, from my brother Seius to love my kin, and to love truth, and to love justice, and through him I learned to know Thea Helvidius K. Dion Brutus, and from him I received the idea of a politic in which there is the same law for all, a polity administered with regard to equal rights and equal freedom of speech, and the idea of a kingly government which respects most of all the freedom of the governed. I learned from him. Also, consistency and undeviating steadiness in my regard for philosophy, and a disposition to do good and to give to others readily, and to cherish good hopes, and to believe that I am loved by my friends, and in him I observed no concealment of his opinions with respect to those whom he condemned, and that his friends had no need to conjecture what he wished or did not wish. But it was quite music plain from Maximus. I learned self-government and not to be led aside by anything, and cheerfulness in all circumstances, as well as in illness, and a just admixture in the moral character of sweetness and dignity, and to do what was set before me without complaining. I observed that everybody believed that he thought as he spoke, and that in all that he did he never had any bad intention, and he never showed amazement and surprise, and was never in a hurry, and never put off doing a thing, nor was perplexed, nor dejected, nor did he ever laugh to disguise his vexation, nor, on the other hand, was he ever passionate or suspicious. He was accustomed to do acts of beneficence, and was ready to forgive, and was free from all falsehood, and he presented the appearance of a man who could not be diverted from right, rather than of a man who had been improved. I observed, too, that no man could ever think that he was despised by Maximus, or ever venture to think himself a better man. He had also the art of being humorous in an agreeable way. In my father I observed mildness of temper and unchangeable resolution in the things which he had determined after due deliberation, and no vain glory in those things which men call honors, and a love of labor and perseverance, and a readiness to listen to those who had anything to propose for the common weal, and undeviating firmness in giving to every man according to his deserts, and a knowledge derived from experience of the occasions for vigorous action and for remission. And I observed that he had overcome all passion for boys, and he considered himself no more than any other citizen, and he released his friends from all obligation to suck with him or to attend him of necessity when he went abroad, and those who had failed to accompany him by reason of any urgent circumstances always found him the same. I observed, too, his habit of careful inquiry in all matters of deliberation, and his persistency, and that he never stopped his investigation through being satisfied with appearances which first present themselves, and that his disposition was to keep his friends, and not to be soon tired of them, nor yet to be extravagant in his affection, and to be satisfied on all occasions, and cheerful, and to foresee things a long way off, and to provide for the smallest without display, and to check immediately popular applause and all flattery, and to be ever watchful over the things which were necessary for the administration of the empire, and to be a good manager of the expenditure, and patiently to endure the blame which he got for such conduct. And he was neither superstitious with respect to the gods, nor did he court men by gifts, or by trying to please them, or by flattering the populace. But he showed sobriety in all things, and firmness, and never any mean thoughts, or action, nor love of novelty, and the things which conduce in any way to the commodity of life, and of which fortune gives an abundant supply, he used without arrogance, and without excusing himself, so that when he had them, he enjoyed them without affectation, and when he had them not, he did not want them. No one could ever say of him that he was either a sophist, or a homebred flippant slave, or a pedant. But everyone acknowledged him to be a man ripe perfect above flattery, able to manage his own and other men's affairs. Besides this, he honored those who were true philosophers, and he did not reproach those who pretended to be philosophers, nor yet was he easily led by them. He was also easy in conversation, and he made himself agreeable without any offensive affectation. He took a reasonable care of his body's health, not as one who was greatly attached to life, nor out of regard to personal appearance, nor yet in a careless way, but so that through his own attention he very seldom stood in need of the physician's art, or of medicine or external applications. He was most ready to give way without envy to those who possessed any particular faculty, such as that of eloquence or knowledge of the law or of morals or of anything else. And he gave them his help, that each might enjoy reputation according to his deserts. And he always acted conformably to the institutions of his country without showing any affectation of doing so. Further, he was not fond of change nor unsteady, but he loved to stay in the same places and to employ himself about the same things. And after his paroxysms of headache, he came immediately fresh and vigorous to his usual occupations. His secrets were not but very few and very rare, and these only about public matters, and he showed prudence and economy in the exhibition of the public spectacles and the construction of public buildings, his donations to the people, and his in such things, for he was a man who looked to what ought to be done, not to the reputation which is got by a man's acts. He did not take the bath at unseasonable hours. He was not fond of building houses, nor curious about what he ate, nor about the texture and color of his clothes, nor about the beauty of his slaves. His dress came from Lorem, his villa on the coast, and from Lanuvium generally. We know how he behaved to the toll-collector at Tusculum, who asked his pardon, and such was all his behavior. There was in him nothing harsh, nor implacable, nor violent, nor, as one may say, anything carried to the sweating point, but he examined all things severally, as if he had abundance of time and without confusion, in an orderly way, vigorously and consistently, and that might be applied to him which is a record of Socrates, that he was able both to abstain from and to enjoy those things which many are too weak to abstain from and cannot enjoy without excess, but to be strong enough both to bear the one and to be sober in the other is the mark of a man who has a perfect and invincible soul, such as he showed in the illness of music, Maximus to the gods. I am indebted for having good grandfathers, good parents, a good sister, good teachers, good associates, good kinsmen and friends. Nearly everything good. Further, I owe it to the gods that I was not hurried into any offense against any of them, though I had a disposition which, if opportunity had offered, might have led me to do something of this kind, but through their favor there never was such a concurrence of circumstances as put me to the trial. Further, I am thankful to the gods that I was not longer brought up with my grandfather's concubine, and that I preserved the flower of my youth, and that I did not make proof of my virility before the proper season, but even deferred the time that I was subjected to a ruler and a father who was able to take away all pride from me and to bring me to the knowledge that it is possible for a man to live in a palace without wanting either guards or embroidered dresses or torches and statues and such like. Show but that it is in such a man's power to bring himself very near to the fashion of a private person without being for this reason either meaner in thought or more remiss in action with respect to the things which must be done for the public interest in a manner that befits a ruler. I thank the gods for giving me such a brother who was able by his moral character to rouse me to vigilance over myself, and who at the same time pleased me by his respect and affection, that my children have not been stupid nor deformed in body, that I did not make more proficiency in rhetoric, poetry, and the other studies in which I should perhaps have been completely engaged if I had seen that I was making progress in them, that I made haste to place those who brought me up in the station of honor, which they seemed to desire, without putting them off, with hope of my doing it some time after, because they were then still young, that I knew Apollonius Rusticus Maximus, that I received clear and frequent impressions about living according to nature, and what kind of a life that is, so that so far as depended on the gods and their gifts and help and inspirations, nothing hindered me from forthwith living according to nature, though I still fall short of it through my own fault and through not observing the admonitions of the gods, and I may almost say their direct instructions that my body has held out so long in such a kind of life that I never touched either Benedicta or Theodotus, and that after having fallen into amatory passions, I was cured. And though I was often out of humor with Rusticus, I never did anything of which I had occasion to repent, that though it was my mother's fate to die young, she spent the last years of her life with me, that whenever I wished to help any man in his need, or on any other occasion, I was never told that I had not the means of doing it, and that to myself the same necessity never happened to receive anything from another, that I have such a wife, so obedient and so affectionate and so simple, that I had abundance of good masters for my children, and that remedies have been shown to me by dreams both others and against blood, spitting and giddiness, and that when I had an inclination to philosophy, I did not fall into the hands of any sophist, and that I did not waste my time on writers of histories or in the resolution of syllogisms, or occupy myself about the investigation of appearances in the heavens, for all these things require the help of the gods and fortune. Book 2. When you wake up in the morning, tell yourself, the people I deal with today will be meddling, ungrateful, arrogant, dishonest, jealous, and surly. They are like this because they can't tell good from evil. But I have seen the beauty of good and the ugliness of evil, and have recognized that the wrongdoer has a nature related to my own, not of the same blood or birth, but the same mind, and possessing a share of the divine, and so none of them can hurt me, no one can implicate me in ugliness, nor can I feel angry at my relative or hate him. We were born to work together like feet, hands, and eyes, like the two rows of teeth, upper and lower, to obstruct each other. Is unnatural to feel anger at someone, to turn your back on him. These are obstructions. Whatever this is that I am, it is flesh and a little spirit and an intelligence. Throw away your books. Stop letting yourself be distracted. That is not allowed. Instead, as if you were dying right now. Despise your flesh, a mess of blood, pieces of bone, a woven tangle of nerves, veins, arteries. Consider what the here it is, air, and never the same air, but vomited out and gulped in again every instant. Finally, the intelligence. Think of it this way. You are an old man. Stop allowing your mind to be a slave, to be jerked about by selfish impulses, to kick against fate and the present, and to mistrust the future. What is divine is full of providence. Even chance is not divorced from nature, from the inweaving and enfolding of things governed by providence. Everything proceeds from it, and then there is necessity and the needs of the whole world, of which you are a part, whatever the nature of the whole does, and whatever serves to maintain it is good for every part of nature. The world is maintained by change in the elements and in the things they compose. That should be enough for you. Treat it as an axiom. Discard your thirst for books, so that you won't die in bitterness, but in cheerfulness and truth, grateful to the gods from the bottom of your heart. Remember how long you've been putting this off, how many extensions the gods gave you, and you didn't use them at some point. You have to recognize what world it is that you belong to, what power rules it, and from what soil you spring, that there is a limit to the time assigned you. And if you don't use it to free yourself, it will be gone and will never return. Concentrate every minute like a Roman, like a man, on doing what's in front of you with precise and genuine seriousness, tenderly, willingly, with justice, and on freeing yourself from all other distractions. Yes, you can. If you do everything as if it were the last thing you were doing in your life and stop being aimless, stop letting your emo-tea override what your mind tells you, stop being hypocritical, self-centered, irritable. You see how few things you have to do to live a satisfying and reverent life if you can manage this. That's all even the gods can ask of you. Yes, keep on degrading yourself, soul, but soon your chance at dignity will be gone. Everyone gets one life, yours is almost used up. And instead of treating yourself with respect, you have entrusted your own happiness to. The souls of others do external things, distract you. Then make time for yourself to learn something worthwhile. Stop letting yourself be pulled in all directions, but make sure you guard against the other kind of confusion people who labor all their lives but have no purpose to direct every thought and impulse toward, are wasting their time, even when hard at music work, ignoring what goes on in other people's souls. No one ever came to grief that way. But if you won't keep track of what your own soul's doing, how can you not be music unhappy? Don't ever forget these things. The nature of the world, my nature, how I relate to the world, and what proportion of it I make up, that you are part of nature, and no one can prevent you from speaking and acting in harmony with it all. Always in comparing sins the way people do, Theophrastus says that the ones committed out of desire are worse than the ones committed out of anger, which is good philosophy. The angry man seems to turn his back on reason out of a kind of pain and inner convulsion. But the man motivated by desire, who is mastered by pleasure, seems somehow more self-indulgent, less manly in his sins. The aphosis is right and philosophically sound, too, to say that the sin committed out of pleasure deserves a harsher rebuke than the one committed out of pain. The angry man is more like a victim of wrongdoing, provoked by pain to anger. The other man rushes into wrongdoing on his own, moved to action by music. Desire you could leave life right now. Let that determine what you do and say and think. If the gods exist, then to abandon human beings is not frightening. The gods would never subject you to harm. And if they don't exist, or don't care what happens to us, what would be the point of living in a world without gods or providence? But they do exist. They do care what happens to us, and everything a person needs to avoid real harm they have placed within him. If there were anything harmful on the other side of death, they would have made sure that the ability to avoid it was within you. If it doesn't harm your character, how can it harm your life? Nature would not have overlooked such dangers through failing to recognize them, or because it saw them, but was powerless to prevent or correct them. Nor would it ever, through inability or incompetence, make such a mistake as to let good and bad things happen indiscriminately to good and bad alike. But death and life success and failure, pain and pleasure, wealth and poverty, all these happen to good and bad alike, and they are neither noble nor shameful, and hence neither good nor music bad. The speed with which all of them vanish, the objects in the world, and the memory of them in time, and the real nature of the things our senses experience, especially those that entice us with pleasure, or frighten us with pain, or are loudly trumpeted by pride, to understand those things. How stupid, contemptible, grimy, decaying, and dead they are. That's what our intellectual powers are for. And to understand what those people really amount to, whose opinions and voices constitute fame, and what dying is. And that if you look at it in the abstract and break down your imaginary ideas of it by logical analysis, you realize that it's nothing but a process of nature which only children can be afraid of, and not only a process of nature, but a necessary one, and how man grasps God with what part of himself he does so, and how that part is conditioned when he does nothing, is more pathetic than people who run around in circles, delving into the things that lie beneath, and conducting investigations into the souls of the people around them, never realizing that all you have to do is to be attentive to the power inside you and worship it sincerely. To worship it is to keep it from being muddied with turmoil and becoming aimless and dissatisfied with nature, divine and human. What is divine deserves our respect because it is good. What as human deserves our affection because it is like us and our pity too. Sometimes for its inability to tell good from bad, as terrible a blindness as the kind that can't tell white from music black, even if you're going to live 3,000 more years or 10 times. That, remember, you cannot lose another life than the one you're living now, or live another one than the one you're losing. The longest amounts to the same as the shortest. The present is the same for everyone. Its loss is the same for everyone, and it should be clear that a brief instant is all that is lost. For you can't lose either the past or the future. How could you lose what you don't have? Remember two things: that everything has always been the same and keeps recurring. And it makes no difference whether you see the same things recur in 100 years or 200 or in an infinite period. Two, that the longest lived and those who will die soonest lose the same thing. The present is all that they can give up, since that is all you have. And what you do not have, you cannot lose. Everything is just an impression, Manus the cynic. And the response is obvious enough, but the point is a useful one. If you take it for what it's worth, the human soul degrades itself above all when it does. It's best to become an abscess, a kind of detached growth on the world. To be disgruntled at anything that happens is a kind of secession from nature, which comprises the nature of all things. When it turns its back on another person or sets out to do it harm, as the souls of the angry do when it is overpowered by pleasure or pain, when it puts on a mask and does or says something artificial or false, when it allows its action and impulse to be without a purpose, to be random and disconnected. Even the smallest things ought to be directed toward a goal. But the goal of rational beings is to follow the rule and law of the most ancient of communities and states: human life, duration, momentary nature, changeable perception, dim condition of body, decay and soul, spinning around. Fortune, unpredictable, lasting fame, uncertainty. The body and its parts are a river, the soul a dream and mist. Life is warfare and a journey far from home. Lasting reputation is oblivion. Then what can guide us? Only philosophy, which means making sure that the power within stays safe and free from assault, superior to pleasure and pain, doing nothing randomly or dishonestly, and with imposture not dependent on anyone else, is doing something or not doing it, and making sure that it accepts what happens and what it is dealt, as coming from the same place it came from, and above all, that it accepts death in a cheerful spirit as nothing but the dissolution of the elements from which each living thing is composed. If it doesn't hurt the individual elements to change continually into one another, why are people afraid of all of them changing and separating? It's a natural thing, and nothing natural is. Music. Music. Evil Book 3. Music. We ought to consider not only that our life is daily wasting away and a smaller part of it is left, but another thing also must be taken into the account, that if a man should live longer, it is quite uncertain whether the understanding will still continue sufficient for the comprehension of things and retain the power of contemplation, which strives to acquire the knowledge of the divine and the human. For if he shall begin to fall into dotage, perspiration, and nutrition, and imagination, and appetite, and whatever else there is, of the kind will not fail but the power of making use of ourselves and filling up the measure of our duty, and clearly separating all appearances and considering whether a man should now depart from life and whatever else of the kind absolutely requires a disciplined reason, all this is already extinguished. We must make haste, then not only because we are daily nearer to death, but also because the conception of things and the understanding of them cease. First, we ought to observe also that even the things which follow, after the things which are produced according to nature, contain something pleasing and attractive. For instance, when bread is baked, some parts are split at the surface, and these parts, which thus open and have a certain fashion contrary to the purpose of the baker's art, are beautiful in a manner and in a peculiar way, excite a desire for eating. And again, figs, when they are quite ripe, gape open, and in the ripe olives, the very circumstance of their being near to rottenness adds a peculiar beauty to the fruit, and the ears of corn bending down, and the lion's eyebrows and the foam which flows from the mouth of wild boars, and many other things, though they are far from being beautiful, if a man should examine them severally still, because they are consequent upon the things which are formed by nature, help to adorn them, and they please the mind, so that if a man should have a feeling and deeper insight with respect to the things which are produced in the universe, there is hardly one of those which follow by way of consequence which will not seem to him to be in a manner disposed so as to give pleasure, and so he will see even the real gaping jaws of wild beasts with no less pleasure than those which painters and sculptors show by imitation. And in an old woman and an old man, he will be able to see a certain maturity and clease, and the attractive loveliness of young persons. He will be able to look on with chaste eyes, and many such things will present themselves, not pleasing to every man, but to him only who has become truly familiar with nature and her works. Hippocrates, after curing many diseases himself, fell sick and died. The sea foretold the deaths of many, and then fate caught them too. Alexander and Pompous and Syr, after so often completely destroying whole cities, and in battle cutting to pieces many 10,000s of cavalry and infantry themselves too, at last departed from life. Heraclitus, after so many speculations on the conflagration of the universe, was filled with water internally, and died smeared all over with mud and lies, destroyed Democritus, and other lies, killed Socrates. What means all this? Thou hast embarked, thou hast made the voyage, thou art come to shore, get out. If indeed to another life there is no want of gods, not even there, but if to a state without sensation it will cease to be held by pains and pleasures, and to be a slave to the vessel which is as much inferior as that which serves it is superior, for the one is intelligence and deity, the other is earth, and corruption, do not waste the remainder of thy life in thoughts about others, when thou dost not refer thy thoughts to some object of common utility, for thou losest the opportunity of doing something else. When thou hast such thoughts as these, what is such a person doing, and why? And what is he saying, and what is he thinking of, and what is he controlled driving, and whatever else of the kind makes us wander away from the observation of our own ruling power. We ought then to check in the series of our thoughts everything that is without a purpose and useless, but most of all the over-curious feeling and the malignant, and a man should use himself to think of those things only about which, if one should suddenly ask, What hast thou now in thy thoughts, with perfect openness, thou mightest immediately answer this or that, so that from thy words it should be plain that everything in thee is simple and benevolent, and such as befits a social animal, and one that cares not for thoughts about pleasure or sensual enjoyments at all, nor has any rivalry or envy and suspicion or anything else, for which thou wouldst blush, if thou should say that thou had it in thy mind. For the man who is such, and no longer delays being among the number of the best, is like a priest and minister of the gods, using to the deity which is planted within him, which makes the man uncontaminated by pleasure, unharmed by any pain, untouched by any insult, feeling no wrong, a fighter in the noblest fight, one who cannot be overpowered by any passion, dyed deep with justice, accepting with all his soul everything which happens, and is assigned to him as his portion, and not often, nor yet without great necessity, and for the general interest imagining what another says or does or thinks for it is only what belongs to himself, that he makes the matter for his activity, and he constantly thinks of that which is allotted to himself out of the sum total of things, and he makes his own acts fair, and he is persuaded that his own portion is good, for the lot which is assigned to each man is carried along with him, and carries him along with it, and he remembers also that every rational animal is his kinsman, and that to care for all men is according to man's nature, and a man should hold on to the opinion not of all, but of those only who confessedly live according to nature. But as to those who live not, so he always bears in mind what kind of men they are, both at home and from home, both by night and by day, and what they are, and with what men they live in impure life accordingly. He does not value at all the praise which comes from such men, since they are not even satisfied with music. Themselves labor not unwillingly, nor without regard to the common interest, nor without due consideration, nor with distraction, nor let studied ornaments set off thy thoughts, and be not either a man of many words, or busy about too many things, and further let the deity which is in thee be the guardian of a living being, manly and of ripe age, and engaged in matter political, and a Roman, and a ruler who has taken his post, like a man waiting for the signal which summons him from life, and ready to go. Having need neither of oath nor of any man's testimony, be cheerful also, and seek not external help, nor the tranquillity which others give a man, then must stand erect, not be kept erect by others, if thou findest in human life anything better than justice, truth, temperance, fortitude, and, in a word, anything better than thy own mind, self-satisfaction, in the things which it enables thee to do, according to right reason, and in the condition that is assigned to thee without thy own choice. If I say thou seest anything better than this, turn to it with all thy soul, and enjoy that which thou hast found to be the best. But if nothing appears to be better than the deity which is planted in thee, which has subjected to itself all thy appetites, and carefully examines all the impressions, and, as Socrates said, has detached itself from the persuasions of sense, and has submitted itself to the gods and cares for mankind, if thou findest everything else smaller and of less value than this, give place to nothing else, for if thou deest once diverge and inclined to it, thou wilt no longer without distraction be able to give the preference to that good thing which is thy proper possession and thy own, for it is not right that anything of any other kind, such as praise from the many or power or enjoyment of pleasure, should come into competition with that which is rationally and politically or practically good. All these things, even though they may seem to adapt themselves to the better things in a small degree, obtain the superiority all at once, and carry us away. But do thou, I say simply and freely, choose the better, and hold to it, but that which is useful is the better. Well, then, if it is useful to thee as a rational being, keep to it. But if it is only useful to thee as an animal, say so, and maintain thy judgment without arrogance. Only take care that thou makest the inquiry by a sure method. Never value anything as profitable to thyself, which shall compel thee to break thy promise, to lose thy self-respect, to hate any man, to suspect, to curse, to act the hypocrite, to desire anything which needs walls and curtains, for he who has preferred to everything intelligence and demon and the worship of its excellence acts, No tragic part does not groan, will not need either solitude or much company. And what is chief of all, he will live without either pursuing or flying from death. But whether for a longer or shorter time, he shall have the soul enclosed in the body he cares not at all for. Even if he must depart immediately, he will go as readily as if he were going to do anything else which can be done with decency and order, taking care of this only all through life, that his thoughts turn not away from anything which belongs to an intelligent animal and a member of a civil community in the mind of one who is chastened and purified. Thou wilt find no corrupt matter, nor impurity, nor any sore-skinned over, nor is his life incomplete when fate overtakes him, as one may say of an actor who leaves the stage before ending and finishing the play. Besides, there is in him nothing servile, nor affected, nor too closely bound to other things, nor yet detached from other things, nothing worthy of blame, nothing which seeks a hiding place reverence. The faculty which produces opinion on this faculty, it entirely depends whether nay there shall exist in thy ruling part any opinion inconsistent with nature and the constitution of the rational animal. And this faculty promises freedom from hasty judgment and friendship towards men, and obedience to the gods, throwing away then all things hold to these only which are few. And besides, bear in mind that every man lives only this present time, which is an indivisible point, and that all the rest of his life is either past or it is uncertain. Short then is the time which every man lives, and small the nook of the earth where he lives, and short too the longest posum as fame. And even this only continued by a succession of poor human beings who will very soon die, and who know not even themselves, much less him who died long. Music, ago to the aids which have been mentioned, let this one still be added. Make for thyself a definition or description of the thing which is presented to thee, so as to see distinctly what kind of a thing it is in its substance, in its nudity, in its complete entirety, and tell thyself its proper name, and the names of the things of which it has been compounded, and into which it will be resolved, for nothing is so productive of elevation of mind as to be able to examine methodically and truly every object which is presented to thee in life, and always to look at things, so as to see at the same time what kind of universe this is, and what kind of use everything performs in it, and what value everything has with reference to the whole, and what with reference to man, who is a citizen of the highest city, of which all other cities are like families, what each thing is, and of what it is composed, and how long it is, the nature of this thing to endure, which now makes an impression on me, and what virtue I have need of with respect to it, such as gentleness, manliness, truth, fidelity, simplicity, contentment, and the rest. Wherefore on every occasion a man should say, this comes from God, and this is according to the apportionment and spinning of the thread of destiny and such like, coincidence and chance, and this is from one of the same stock, and a kinsman and partner, one who knows not, however, what is according to his nature. But I know for this reason I behave towards him according to the natural law of fellowship with benevolence and justice at the same time. However, in things indifferent, I attempt to ascertain the value of each, if thou workest at that which is before thee, following right reasons seriously, vigorously, calmly, without allowing anything else to distract thee, but keeping thy divine part pure, as if thou should be bound to give it back immediately, if thou holdest to this, expecting nothing, fearing nothing, but satisfied with thy present activity, according to nature, and with heroic truth, in every word and sound which thou usest, thou wilt live happy. And there is no man who is able to prevent this, as physicians have always their instruments and knives ready for cases which suddenly require their skill. So do thou have principles ready for the understanding of things divine and human, and for doing everything, even the smallest, with a recollection of the bond which unites the divine and human to one another. For neither wilt thou do anything well which pertains to man without at the same time having a reference to things divine, nor the contrary. No longer wander at hazard, for neither wilt thou read thy own memoirs, nor the acts of the ancient Romans and Helen, and the selections from books which thou was reserving for thy old age. Hasten then to the end which thou hast before thee, and throwing away idle hopes, come to thy own aid, if thou carest at all for thyself. While it is in thy power, they know not how many things are signified by the words stealing, sowing, buying, keeping quiet, seeing what ought to be done. For this is not affected by the eyes, but by another kind of vision. Body, soul, intelligence to the body, belong sensations to the soul. Appetites to the intelligence principles to receive the impression of forms by means of appearances belongs even to animals. To be pulled by the strings of desire belongs both to wild beasts and to men who have made themselves into women, and to a Pharis and a Nero. And to have the intelligence that guides to the things which appear suitable belongs also to those who do not believe in the gods, and who betray their country and do their impure deeds when they have shut the doors. If then everything else is common to all that I have mentioned, there remains that which is peculiar to the good man, to be pleased and content with what happens, and with the thread which is spun for him, and not to defile the divinity which is planted in his breast, nor disturb it by a crowd of images, but to preserve it tranquil, following it obediently as a god, neither saying anything contrary to the truth, nor doing anything contrary to justice. And if all men refuse to believe that he lives a simple, modest, and contented life, he is neither angry with any of them, nor does he deviate from the way which leads to the end of life, to which a man ought to come, pure, tranquil, ready to depart, and without any compulsion, perfectly reconciled to his lot. Book 4. That which rules within, when it is according to nature, is so affected with respect to the events which happen that it always easily adapts itself to that which is and is presented to it, for it requires no definite material, but it moves towards its purpose under certain conditions, however, and it makes a material for itself out of that which opposes it, as fire lays hold of what falls into it, by which a small light would have been extinguished. But when the fire is strong, it soon appropriates to itself the matter which is heaped on it, and consumes it and rises higher. By means of this very music material, let no act be done without a purpose, nor otherwise than according to the perfect principles of art. Music. Men seek retreats for themselves, houses in the country, seashores and mountains, and thou too art one to desire such things very much. But this is altogether a mark of the most common sort of men, for it is in thy power, whenever thou shalt choose, to retire into thyself, for nowhere, either with more quiet or more freedom from trouble, does a man retire than into his own soul, particularly when he has within him such thoughts, that by looking into them he is immediately in perfect tranquility. And I affirm that tranquility is nothing else than the good ordering of the mind constantly. Then give to thyself this retreat, and renew thyself, and let thy principles be brief and fundamental, which as soon as thou shalt recur to them will be sufficient to cleanse the soul completely, and to send thee back free from all discontent with the things to which thou returnest. For with what art thou discontented? With the badness of men. Recall to thy mind this conclusion, that rational animals exist for one another, and that to endure is a part of justice, and that men do wrong involuntarily, and consider how many already, after mutual enmity, suspicion, hatred, and fighting, have been stretched, dead, reduced to ashes, and be quiet at last. But perhaps thou art dissatisfied with that which is assigned to thee out of the universe. Recall to thy recollection this alternative. Either there is providence or Adam's fortuitous concurrence of things, or remember the arguments by which it has been proved that the world is a kind of political community, and be quiet at last, but perhaps corporeal things will still fasten upon thee. Consider then further that the mind mingles not with the breath, whether moving gently or violently, when it has once drawn itself apart and discovered its own power, and think also of all that thou hast heard and assented to about pain and pleasure, and be quiet at last. But perhaps the desire of the thing called fame will torment thee. See how soon everything is forgotten, and look at the chaos of infinite time on each side of the present, and the emptiness of applause, and the changeableness and want of judgment in those who pretend to give praise, and the narrowness of the space within which it is circumscribed. And be quiet at last, for the whole earth is a point, and how small a nook in it is this thy dwelling, and how few are there in it. And what kind of people are they who will praise thee? This then remains. Remember to retire into this little territory of thy own, and above all do not distract or strain thyself, but be free, and look at things as a man, as a human being, as a citizen, as a mortal, but among the things readiest to thy hand, to which thou shalt turn, let there be these which are two. One is that things do not touch the soul, for they are external and remain immovable, but our perturbations come only from the opinion which is within the other, is that all these things which thou seest change immediately and will no longer be, and constantly bear in mind how many of these changes thou hast already witnessed. The universe's transformation life is opinion. If our intellectual part is common, the reason also, in respect of which we are rational beings, is common. If this is so common, also is the reason which commands us what to do and what not to do. If this is so, there is a common law also. If this is so, we are fellow citizens. If this is so, we are members of some political community. If this is so, the world is in a manner of a state of what other common political community. Will anyone say that the whole human race are members? And from this common political community comes also our very intellectual faculty and reasoning faculty, and our capacity for law. Or whence do they come? For as my earthly part is a portion given to me from certain earth, and that which is watery from another element, and that which is hot and fiery from some peculiar source, for nothing comes out of that which is nothing, as nothing also returns to non-existence. So also the intellectual part comes from some source. Death is such as generation, is a mystery of nature, a composition out of the same elements, and a decomposition into the same, and altogether not a thing of which any man should be ashamed for it, is not contrary to the nature of a reasonable animal, and not contrary to the reason of our constitution. It is natural that these things should be done by such persons. It is a matter of necessity, and if a man will not have it, so he will not allow the fig tree to have juice. But by all means, bear this in mind, that within a very short time, both thou and he will be dead. And soon not even your names will be left behind. Take away thy opinion, and then there is taken away the complaint, I have been harmed. Take away the complaint, I have been harmed, and the harm is taken away. That which does not make a man worse than he was, also does not make his life worse, nor does it harm him either from without or from within. The nature of that which is universally useful has been compelled to do this. Consider that everything which happens justly, and if thou observes carefully, thou wilt find it to be so. I do not say only with respect to the continuity of the series of things, but with respect to what is just, and as if it were done by one who assigns to each thing its value. Observe, then, as thou hast begun, and whatever thou doest, do it in conjunction with this, to being good, and in the sense in which a man is properly understood to be. Music. Good. Keep to this in every action. Do not have such an opinion of things as he has, who does thee wrong, or such as he wishes thee to have, but look at them as they are in music. Truth, a man should always have these two rules in readiness, the one to do only whatever the reason of the ruling and legislating faculty may suggest for the use of men, the other to change thy opinion, if there is anyone at hand who sets thee right, and moves thee from any opinion. But this change of opinion must proceed only from a certain persuasion as of what is just or of common advantage and the like, not because it appears pleasant or brings reputation. Many grains of frankincense on the same altar, one falls before another, falls after, but it makes no difference. Within 10 days thou wilt seem a god to those to whom thou art now a beast and an ape. If thou wilt return to thy principles and the worship of reason, do not act as if thou going to live 10. 000 years death hangs over thee while thou livest, while it is in thy power be good. How much trouble he avoids who does not look to see what his neighbor says or does or thinks, but only to what he does himself, that it may be just and pure. Or, as Agathon says, look not around at the depraved morals of others, but run straight along the line without deviating from it. He who has a vehement desire for posthumous fame does not consider that every one of those who remember him will himself also die very soon. Then again, also they who have succeeded them, until the whole remembrance shall have been extinguished, as it is transmitted through men who foolishly admire and perish, but suppose that those who will remember are even immortal, and that the remembrance will be immortal. What then is this to thee? And I say not, what is it to the dead? But what is it to the living? What is praise? Except indeed so far as it has a certain utility, for thou now rejected unseasonably the gift of nature, clinging to something else. Everything which is in any way beautiful is beautiful in itself, and terminates in itself, not having praise as part of itself, neither worse than nor better is a thing made by being praised. I affirm this also of the things which are called beautiful by the vulgar, for example, material things, and works of art. That which is really beautiful has no need of anything, not more than law, not more than truth, not more than benevolence or modesty. Which of these things is beautiful because it is praised or spoiled by being blamed is such a thing as an emerald made worse than it was if it is not praised, or gold, ivory, purple, a lyre, a little knife, a flower, a music shrub. If souls continue to exist, how does the air contain them from eternity? But how does the earth contain the bodies of those who have been buried from time so remote? For as here the mutation of these bodies, after a certain continuance, whatever it may be, and their dissolution, make room for other dead bodies, so the souls, which are removed into the air, after subsisting for some time, are transmuted and diffused, and assume a fiery nature by being received into the seminal intelligence of the universe, and in this way make room for the fresh souls which come to dwell there. And this is the answer which a man might give on the hypothesis of souls continuing to exist. But we must not only think of the number of bodies which are thus buried, but also of the number of animals which are daily eaten by us and the other animals, for what a number is consumed, and thus in a manner buried in the bodies of those who feed on them. And nevertheless, this earth receives them by reason of the changes of these bodies into blood, and the transformations into the aerial or the fiery element. What is the investigation into the truth in this matter, the division into that which is material and that which is the cause of form? The formal do not be whirled about, but in every movement have respect to justice, and on the occasion of every impression maintain the faculty of comprehension or understanding. Everything harmonizes with me, which is harmonious to thee. O universe, nothing for me is too early nor too late, which is in due time for thee. Everything is fruit to me which thy seasons bring. O nature, from thee are all things, in thee are all things, to thee all things return, the poet says. Dear city of Cyclops, and wilt not thou say, dear city of music? Zeus, occupy thyself with few things, says the philosopher, if thou wouldst be tranquil, but consider if it would not be better to say, do what is necessary, and whatever the reason of the animal, which is naturally social, requires, and as it requires for this, brings not only the tranquility which comes from doing well, but also that which comes from doing few things, for the greatest part of what we say and do being unnecessary. If a man takes this away, he will have more leisure and less uneasiness. Accordingly, on every occasion a man should ask himself, is this one of the unnecessary things? Now, a man should take away not only unnecessary acts, but also unnecessary thoughts. For thus superfluous acts will not follow after try how the life of the good man suits thee, the life of him who is satisfied with his portion out of the whole, and satisfied with his own just acts and benevolent position. Hast thou seen those things? Look also at these. Do not disturb thyself. Make thyself all simplicity. Does anyone do wrong? It is to himself that he does the wrong. Has anything happened to thee? Well, out of the universe, from the beginning, everything which happens has been apportioned and spun out to thee. In a word, thy life is short. Thou must turn to profit the present by the aid of reason and justice. Be sober in thy relaxation. Either it is a well-arranged universe or a chaos huddled together, but still a universe. But can a certain order subsist in thee and disorder in the all? And this too, when all things are so separated and diffused and sympathetic, a black character, a womanish character, a stubborn character, bestial, childish, animal, stupid, counterfeit, scarless, fraudulent, tyrannical, if he is a stranger to the universe who does not know what is in it, no less, is he a stranger who does not know what is going on in it. He is a runaway who flies from social reason. He is blind who shuts the eyes of the understanding. He is poor who has need of another and has not from himself all things which are useful for life. He is an abscess on the universe who withdraws and separates himself from the reason of our common nature through being displeased with the things which happen, for the same nature produces this, and has produced thee too. He is a piece rent-ander from the state, who tears his own soul from that of reasonable animals, which is one. The one is a philosopher without a tunic, and the other without a book. Here is another half-naked bread. I have not, he says, and I abide by reason, and I do not get the means of living out of my learning, and I abide by my reason. Love the art, poor as it may be, which thou hast learned, and be content with it, and pass through the rest of life like one who has entrusted to the gods with his whole soul all that he has, making thyself neither the tyrant nor the slave of any music. Man, consider, for example, the times of Vespasian. Thou wilt see all these things, people marrying, bringing up children sick, dying, wearing, feasting, trafficking, cultivating the ground, flattering, obstinately, arrogant, suspecting, plotting, wishing for some to die, grumbling about the present, loving, heaping up treasure, desiring counselship, kingly power. Well, then that life of these people no longer exists at all. Again, removed to the times of Trun. Again, all is the same. Their life too is gone, in like manner view. Also the other epochs of time and of whole nations. And see how many, after great efforts, soon fell and were resolved into the elements. But chiefly thou should think of those whom thou hast thyself known distracting themselves about idle things, neglecting to do what was in accordance with their proper constitution, and to hold firmly to this, and to be content with it. And herein it is necessary to remember that the attention given to everything has its proper value and proportion. For thus thou wilt not be dissatisfied if thou appest thyself to smaller matters no further than is. Music fit. The words which were formerly familiar are now antiquated. So also the names of those who were famed old are now in a manner antiquated Camillus Caeso Vasus Leonatus, and after also Scipio and Cato, then Augustus, then also Hadrian and Antoninus, for all things soon pass away and become a mere tale and complete oblivion, soon buries them. And I say this of those who have shown in a wondrous way, for the rest, as soon as they have breathed out their breath, they are gone, and no man speaks of them. And to conclude the matter, what is even an eternal remembrance? A mere nothing. What then is that about which we ought to employ our serious pains? This one, thoughts just, and acts social, and words which never lie, and a disposition which gladly accepts all that happens as necessary, as usual, as flowing from a principle and source of the same music, kind, willingly give thyself up, to clothe one of the fates, allowing her to spin thy thread into whatever thing she pleases. Everything is only for a day, both that which remembers and that which is remembered. Observe constantly that all things take place by change, and accustom thyself to consider that the nature of the universe loves nothing so much as to change the things which are, and to make new things like them, for everything that exists is in a manner the seed of that which will be, but thou art thinking only of seeds which are cast into the earth or into a womb. But this is a very vulgar notion. Thou wilt soon die, and thou art not yet simple, not free from perturbations, nor without suspicion of being hurt by external things, nor kindly disposed towards all. Nor dost thou yet place wisdom only in acting, music, justly examine men's ruling principles, even those of the wise, what kind of things they avoid, and what kind they music, pursue what is evil to thee, does not subsist in the ruling principle of another, nor yet in any turning and mutation of thy corporeal covering. Where is it then? It is in that part of thee in which subsists the power of forming opinions about evils. Let this power then not form such opinions, and all is well. And if that which is nearest to it, the poor body, is burnt filled with matter and rottenness, nevertheless let the part which forms opinions about these things be quiet. That is, let it judge that nothing is either bad or good, which can happen equally to the bad man and the good, for that which happens equally to him who lives contrary to nature, and to him who lives according to nature, is neither according to nature nor contrary to music. Nature constantly regard the universe as one living being, having one substance and one soul, and observe how all things have reference to one perception, the perception of this one living being, and how all things act with one movement, and how all things are the cooperating causes of all things which exist. Observe, too, the continuous spinning of the thread and the contexture of the web. Thou art a little soul bearing about a corpse. As Epicus used to say, it is no evil for things to undergo change, and no good for things to subsist in consequence of music. Change time is like a river made up of the events which happen, and a violent stream. For as soon as a thing has been seen, it is carried away, and another comes in its place, and this will be carried away too. Everything which happens is as familiar and well known as the rose in spring and the fruit in summer, for such is disease and death and calumny and treachery, and whatever else delights, fools, or vexes them in the series of things. Those which follow are always aptly fitted to those which have gone before, for this series is not like a mere enumeration of disjointed things, which has only a necessary sequence, but it is a rational connection, and as all existing things are arranged together harmoniously, so the things which come into existence exhibit no mere succession, but a certain wonderful relationship. Always remember the saying of Heraclitus that the death of earth is to become water, and the death of water is to become air, and the death of air is to become fire, and reversely, and think, too, of him who forgets whither the way leads, and that men quarrel with that with which they are most constantly in communion. The reason which governs the universe, and the things which daily meet with, seem to them strange, and consider that we ought not to act and speak as if we were asleep, for even in sleep we seem to act and speak, and that we ought not, like children who learn from their parents, simply to act and speak as we have been taught. If any god told thee that thou shalt die tomorrow, or certainly on the day after tomorrow, thou would not care much, whether it was on the third day or on the tomorrow, unless thou was in the highest degree mean-spirited, for how small is the difference. So think it no great thing to die after as many years as thou can name, rather than music tomorrow. Think continually how many physicians are dead after often contracting their eyebrows over the sick, and how many astrologers, after predicting with great pretensions the deaths of others, and how many philosophers, after endless discourses on death or immortality, how many heroes after killing thousands, and how many tyrants who have used their power over men's lives with terrible insolence, as if they were immortal, and how many cities are entirely dead. So to speak, Hylias and Pompey, and Herculaneum and others, innumerable, add to the reckoning all whom thou hast known, one after another. One man, after burying another, has been laid out dead, and another buries him, and all this in a short time. To conclude, always observe how ephemeral and worthless human things are, and what was yesterday a little mucus tomorrow will be a mummy, or ashes pass then through this little space of time conformably to nature, and end thy journey in content, just as an olive falls off when it is ripe, blessing nature who produced it, and thanking the tree on which music grew. Be like the promontory against which the waves continually break, but it stands firm and tames the fury of the water around it. Music! Unhappy am I, because this has happened to me. Not so, but happy am I, though this has happened to me, because I continue free from pain, neither crushed by the present nor fearing the future, for such a thing as this might have happened to every man. But every man would not have continued free from pain on such an occasion. Why then is that rather a misfortune than this? A good fortune, and dost thou in all cases call that a man's misfortune, which is not a deviation from man's nature? And does a thing seem to thee to be a deviation from man's nature when it is not contrary to the will of man's nature? Well, thou knowest the will of nature. Will then this which has happened prevent thee from being just, magnanimous, temperate, prudent, secure against inconsiderate opinions and falsehood? Will it prevent thee from having modesty, for freedom, and everything else, by the presence of which man's nature obtains all that is its own? Remember, too, on every occasion which leads thee to vexation, to apply this principle, not that this is a misfortune, but that to bear it nobly is good. Music fortune. It is a vulgar, but still a useful help towards contempt of death, to pass in review those who have tenaciously stuck to life. What more then have they gained than those who have died ere early? Certainly they lie in their tombs somewhere at last, Catus Fabius, Julianus Lepidus, or anyone else like them, who have carried out many to be buried, and then were carried out themselves all together. The interval is small between birth and death, and consider with how much trouble, and in company with what sort of people, and in what a feeble body this interval is laboriously passed. Do not then consider life a thing of any value, for look to the density of time behind thee, and to the time which is before thee, another boundless space in this infinity. Then what is the difference between him who lives 3 days and him who lives 3? Music generations always run to the short way, and the short way is the natural. Accordingly say and do everything in conformity with the soundest reason for such a purpose, frees a man from trouble and warfare, and all artifice and ostentation. Music. Display Book 5 at dawn. When you have trouble getting out of bed, tell yourself, I have to go to work as a human being. What do I have to complain of if I'm going to do what I was born for, the things I was brought into the world to do? Or is this what I was created for, to huddle under the blankets and stay warm? But it's nicer here. So you were born to feel nice instead of doing things and experiencing them, don't you? See the plants, the birds, the ants, and SP fighters and bees going about their individual tasks, putting the world in order as best they can, and you're not willing to do your job as a human being. Why aren't you running to do what your nature demands? But we have to sleep sometime, agreed. But nature set a limit on that, as it did on eating and drinking, and you're over the limit. You've had more than enough of that, but not of working there. You're still below your quota. You don't love yourself enough, or you'd love your nature too. And what it demands of you, people who love what they do wear themselves down doing it. They even forget to wash or eat. Do you have less respect for your own nature than the engraver does for engraving, the dancer for the dance, the miser for money, or the social climber for status? When they're really possessed by what they do, they'd rather stop eating and sleeping than give up. Practicing their arts is helping others less valuable to you, not worth your effort to shrug it all off and wipe it clean, every annoyance and distraction, and reach utter stillness, child's play. If an action or utterance is appropriate, then it's appropriate, for you don't be put off by other people's comments and criticism. If it's right to say or do it, then it's the right thing for you to do, or say the others obey their own lead. Follow their own impulses. Don't be distracted. Keep walking. Follow your own nature and follow nature along the road they share. I walk through what is natural until the time comes to sink down and rest, to entrust my last breath to the source of my daily breathing. Fall on the source of my father's seed, of my mother's blood, of my nurse's milk, of my daily food, and drink through all these years what sustains my footsteps and the use I make of it, the many uses. No one could ever accuse you of being quick-witted, all right, but there are plenty of other things you can't claim you haven't got in. You practice the virtues. You can show honesty, gravity, endurance, austerity, resignation, abstinence, patience, sincerity, moderation, seriousness, high-mindedness. Don't you see how much you have to offer, beyond excuses like can't, and yet you still settle for less? Or is it some inborn condition that makes you whiny and grasping and obsequious, makes you complain about your body and curry favor and show off, and leaves you so turbulent inside? No, you could have broken free a long way back, and then you would have been only a little slow, not so quick on the uptake, and you need to work on that as well. That slowness, not something to be ignored, let alone to prize. Some people, when they do someone a favor, are always looking for a chance to call it in, and some aren't. But they're still aware of it, still regard it as a debt. But others don't even do that. They're like a vine that produces grapes without looking for anything in return. A horse at the end of the race, a dog when the hunt is over, a bee with its honey stored, and a human being after helping others. They don't make a fuss about it. They just go on to something else as the vine looks forward to bearing fruit. Again in season, we should be like that, acting almost unconsciously. Yes, except conscious of it, because it's characteristic of social beings that they see themselves as acting socially and expect their neighbors to see it too. That's true, but you're misunderstanding me. You'll wind up like the people I mentioned before, misled by plausible reasoning. But if you make an effort to understand what I'm saying, then you won't need to worry about neglecting your social duty, just as you overhear people saying that the doctor prescribed such and such for him, like riding or cold baths or walking barefoot. Say this nature prescribed illness for him, or blindness, or the loss of a limb, or whatever their prescribed means, something like ordered so as to further his recovery. And so, too, here what happens to each of us is ordered. It furthers our destiny. And when we describe things as taking place, we're talking like builders who say that blocks in a wall or a pyramid take their place in the structure and fit together in a harmonious pattern, for there is a single harmony, just as the world forms a single body comprising all bodies, so fate forms a single purpose comprising all purposes. Even complete illiterates acknowledge it when they say that something brought on this or that brought on yes, or prescribed it. And in that case, let's accept it as we accept what the doctor prescribes. It may not always be pleasant, but we embrace it because we want to get. Well, look at the accomplishment of nature's plans in that light. The way you look at your own health and accept what happens, even if it seems hard to accept. Accept it because of what it leads to, the good health of the world and the well-being and prosperity of Zeus himself, who would not have brought this on anyone unless it brought benefit to the world as a whole. No nature would do that brings something about that wasn't beneficial to what it governed. So there are two reasons to embrace what happens. One is that it's happening to you. It was prescribed for you, and it pertains to you. The thread was spun long ago by the oldest cause of all. The other reason is that what happens to an individual is a cause of well-being. In what dire the world of its well-being, its fulfillment of its very existence. Even because the whole is damaged, if you cut away anything at all, from its continuity and its coherence, not only its parts but its purposes. And that's what you're doing when you complain, hacking and destroying, not to feel exasperated or defeated or despondent, because your days aren't packed with wise and moral actions, but to get back up when you fail to celebrate, behaving like a human, however imperfectly, and fully embrace the pursuit that you've embarked on, and not to think of philosophy as your instructor, but as the sponge and egg white that relieve ophthalmia, as a soothing ointment, a warm lotion, not showing off your obedience to the logos, but resting in it. Remember, philosophy requires only what your nature already demands. What you've been after is something else again, something unnatural. But what could be preferable? That's exactly how pleasure traps us, isn't it? Wouldn't magnanimity be preferable? Or freedom, honesty? Prudence, piety? And is there anything preferable to thought itself, to logic, to understanding? Think of their sure-footedness, their fluent stillness. Things are wrapped in such a veil of mystery that many good philosophers have found it impossible to make sense of them. Even the Stoics have trouble. Any assessment we make is subject to alteration, just as we are ourselves. Look closely at them. How impermanent they are, how meaningless, things that a pervert can own, a thief. Then look at the way the people around you behave. Even the best of them are hard to put up with, not to mention putting up with yourself in such deep darkness, such a sewer in the flux of material, of time, of motion, and things moved. I don't know what there is to value or to work for. Quite the contrary. We need to comfort ourselves and wait for dissolution and not get impatient in the meantime, but take refuge in these two things. One, nothing can happen to me that isn't natural too. I can keep from doing anything that God and my own spirit don't approve. No one can force me. Music. Two, what am I doing with my soul? Interrogate yourself to find out what inhabits your so-called mind and what kind of soul you have now. A child's soul, an adolescent, a woman's, a tyrant soul, the soul of a predator or its prey. Another way to grasp what ordinary people mean by goods. Suppose you took certain things as touchstones of goodness, prudence, self-control, justice, and courage, as if you understood goods as meaning those. You wouldn't be able to follow that line about so many goods. It wouldn't make any sense to you. Whereas if you'd internalize the conventional meaning, you'd be able to follow it perfectly. You'd have no trouble seeing the author's meaning and why it was funny, which shows that most people do acknowledge a distinction. Otherwise, we wouldn't recognize the first sense as jarring and reject it automatically, whereas we accept the second, the one referring to wealth and the benefits of celebrity and high living, as amusing and apropos. Now go a step further. Ask yourself whether we should accept as goods and should value the things we have. To think of, to have the line make sense, the ones whose abundance leaves their owner with no place to. I am made up of substance and what animates it, and neither one can ever stop existing any more than it began to. Every portion of me will be reassigned as another portion of the world, and that in turn transformed into another. I was produced through one such transformation, and my parents too, and so on. Back, the logos and its employment are forces sufficient for themselves and for their works. They start from their own beginning. They proceed to the appointed end. We call such activities directed from the directness of their course. Nothing pertains to human beings except what defines us as human. No other things can be demanded of us. They aren't proper to human nature, nor is it incomplete without them. It follows that they are not our goal, or what helps us reach it, the good. If any of them were proper to us, it would be improper to disdain or resist it. Nor would we admire people who show themselves immune to it. If the things themselves were good, it could hardly be good to give them up. But in reality, the more we deny ourselves such things, and things like them, or are deprived of them, involuntarily, even the better we become. The things you think about determine the quality of your mind. Your soul takes on the color of your thoughts. Color it with a run of thoughts. Like these, one anywhere you can lead your life, you can lead a good one. Lives are LED at court. Then good ones can be two things gravitate toward what they were intended for. What things gravitate toward is their goal. Things' goal is what benefits it. It's good. A rational being's good is unselfishness. What we were born for, that's nothing new. Remember, lower things for the sake of higher ones and higher ones for one another. Things that have consciousness are higher than those that don't. And those with the logo still higher. It is crazy to want what is impossible and impossible for the work not to do so. Nothing happens to anyone that he can't endure. The same thing happens to other people, and they weather it unharmed out of sheer obliviousness or because they want to display character. Is wisdom really so much weaker than ignorance and vanity? Things have no hold on a soul. They have no access to. It cannot move or direct it. It is moved and directed by itself alone. It takes the thing before it and interprets them as it sees fit. In a sense, people are our proper occupation. Our job is to do them good and put up with them. But when they obstruct our proper tasks, they become irrelevant to us like sunwind. Animals, our actions may be impeded by them, but there can be no impeding our intentions or our dispositions because we can accommodate and adapt. The mind adapts and converts to its own purposes. The obstacle to our acting, the impediment to action advances. Action, what stands in the way, becomes the way. Honor that which is greatest in the world, that on whose business all things are employed, and by whom they are governed. And honor what is greatest in yourself, the part that shares its nature with that power. All things in you as well are employed about its business, and your life is governed by it. If it does not harm the community, it does not harm its members. When you think you've been injured, apply this rule. If the community isn't injured by it, neither am I. And if it is anger is not the answer, show the offender where he went wrong. Keep in mind how fast things pass by and are gone. Those that are now and those to come existence flows past us like a river. The what is in constant flux. The why has 1,000 variations. Nothing is stable, not even what's right here. The infinity of past and future gapes before us, a chasm whose depths we cannot see, so it would take an idiot to feel self-importance or distress or any indignation either, as if the things that irritate us lasted. Remember matter. How tiny your share of it time, how brief and fleeting your allotment of it fate, how small a role you play in it. So other people hurt me, that's their problem. Their character and actions are not mine. What is done to me is ordained by nature. What I do by my own, the mind is the ruler of the soul. It should remain unstirred by agitations of the flesh, gentle and violent ones alike, not mingling with them, but fencing itself off and keeping those feelings in their place when they make their way into your thoughts through the sympathetic link between mind and body. Don't try to resist the sensation. The sensation is natural, but don't let the mind start in with judgments, calling it good or bad to live with. The gods, and to do that is to show them that your soul accepts what it's given and does what the Spirit requires. The Spirit God gave each of us to lead and guide us, a fragment of Himself, which is our mind, our logos. Don't be irritated at people's smell or bad breath. What's the point with that mouth, with those armpits? They're going to produce that odor, but they have a brain. Can't they figure it out? Can't they recognize the problem? So you have a brain as well. Good for you. Then use your logic to awaken and show him. Make him realize it. If he'll listen, then you'll have solved the problem without anger. And if they won't let you do, you can depart life now and forfeit nothing. If the smoke makes me cough, I can leave. What's so hard about that? Until things reach that point, I'm free. No one can keep me from doing what I want. And I want what is proper. To rational beings living together, the world's intelligence is not selfish. It created lower things for the sake of higher ones and attuned the higher ones to one another. Look how it subordinates, how it connects, how it assigns each thing, what each deserves, and brings the better things into alignment. How have you behaved to the gods, to your parents, to your siblings, to your wife, to your children, to your teachers, to your nurses, to your friends, to your relatives, to your slaves? Have they all had from you nothing wrong and worthy, either word or deed? Consider all that you've gone through, all that you've survived, and that the story of your life is done, your assignment complete. How many good things have you seen? How much pain and pleasure have you resisted? How many honors have you declined? How many unkind people have you been kind? Music. To why do other souls, unskilled, untrained, disturb the soul with skill and understanding? And which is that the one that knows the beginning and the end, and knows the logos that runs through all things, and that assigns to all a place, each in its allotted span throughout the whole of time. Soon you'll be ashes, or bones, a mere name at most, and even that is just a sound and echo. The things we want in life are empty, stale, and trivial dogs snarling at each other, quarreling children laughing, and then bursting into tears a moment later. Trust, shame, justice, truth gone from the earth, and only found in heaven. Why are you still here? Sensory objects are shifting and unstable. Our senses dim and easily deceived. The soul itself, a decoction of the blood. Fame in a world like this is worthless, and so wait for it patiently. Annihilation or metamorphosis, and until that time comes, honor and revere the gods, treat human beings as they deserve. Be tolerant with others and strict with yourself. Remember, nothing belongs to you but your flesh and blood, and nothing else is under your control. You can lead an untroubled life provided you can grow, can think and act systematically, two characteristics shared by gods and men, and every irrational creature. One, not to let others hold you back. Two, to locate goodness in thinking and doing the right thing, and to limit your desires to that. If this evil is not of my doing, nor the result of it, and the community is not endangered, why should it bother me? Where's the danger for the community not to be overwhelmed by what you imagine, but just do what you can and should? And if suffer in inessentials, not to treat that as a defeat. I was once a fortunate man, but at some point, fortune abandoned me. But true, good fortune is what you make for yourself. Good fortune, good character, good intentions, and good actions. Music. Book 6. The substance of the universe is obedient and compliant, and the reason which governs it has in itself no cause for doing evil, for it has no malice, nor does it do evil to anything, nor is anything harmed by it. But all things are made and perfected according to this reason. Let it make no difference to thee whether thou art cold or warm, if thou art doing thy duty, and whether thou art drowsy or satisfied with sleep, and whether ill spoken of or praised, and whether dying or doing something else for it, is one of the acts of life. This act by which we die, it is sufficient then, in this act also to do well what we have in hand. Look within. Let neither the peculiar quality of anything nor its value escape thee. All existing things soon change, and they will either be reduced to vapor, if indeed all substance is one, or they will be dispersed. The reason which governs knows what its own disposition is, and what it does, and on what material it works. The best way of avenging thyself is not to become like the wrongdoer. Take pleasure in one thing and rest in it, in passing from one social act to another social act, thinking of God. The ruling principle is that which rouses and turns itself. And while it makes itself such as it is and such as it wills to be, it also makes everything which happens appear to itself to be such as it wills in conformity to the nature of the universe. Every single thing is accomplished, for certainly it is not in conformity to any other nature that each thing is accomplished, either a nature which externally comprehends this, or a nature which is comprehended within this nature, or a nature external and independent of this. The universe is either a confusion and a mutual involution of things, and a dispersion, or it is unity and order and providence. If then it is the former, why do I desire to tea in a fortuitous combination of things and such a disorder, and why do I care about anything else than how I shall at last become earth? And why am I disturbed, for the dispersion of my elements will happen whatever I do? But if the other supposition is true, I venerate, and I am firm, and I trust in him who governs. When thou hast been compelled by circumstances to be disturbed in a manner, quickly return to thyself, and do not continue out of tune longer than the compulsion lasts. For thou wilt have more mastery over the harmony by continually recurring to music. If thou had a stepmother and the mother at the same time, thou wouldst be dutiful to thy stepmother, but still thou would constantly return to thy mother. Let the court and philosophy now be to thee. Stepmother and mother, return to philosophy frequently, and repose in her, through whom what thou meest within the court appears to thee tolerable, and thou appearest tolerable in the court. When we have meat before us, in such eatables we receive the impression that this is the dead body of a fish, and this is the dead body of a bird or of a pig, and again that this Pharian is only a little grape juice, and this purple robe some sheep's wool dyed with the blood of a shellfish. Such then are these impressions, and they reach the things themselves and penetrate them. And so we see what kind of things they are. Just in the same way ought we to act all through life, and where there are things which appear most worthy of our approbation, we ought to lay them bare and look at their worthlessness and strip them of all the words by which they are exalted, for outward show is a wonderful perverter of the reason. And when thou art most sure that thou art employed about things worth thy pains, it is then that it cheats thee most. Consider then what Crate says of Xenocrates, music himself. Most of the things which the multitude admire are referred to objects of the most general kind, those which are held together by cohesion or natural organization, such as stones, wood, fig trees, vines, olives. But those which are admired by men who are a little more reasonable are referred to the things which are held together by a living principle, as flocks, herds. Those which are admired by men who are still more instructed are the things which are held together by a rational soul, not however a universal soul, but rational so far as it is a soul skilled in some art or expert in some other way, or simply rational so far as it possesses a number of slaves. But he who values rational soul, a soul universal and fitted for political life, regards nothing else except this, and above all things he keeps his soul in a condition and in an activity conformable to reason and social life, and he cooperates to this end with those who are are of the same kind as himself. Some things are hurrying into existence, and others are hurrying out of it. And of that which is coming into existence, part is already extinguished. Motions and changes are continually renewing the world, just as the uninterrupted course of time is always renewing the infinite duration of ages in this flowing stream, then on which there is no abiding. What is there of the things which hurry by, on which a man would set a high price? It would be just as if a man should fall in love with one of the sparrows which fly by, but it has already passed out of sight. Something of this kind is the very life of every man, like the exhalation of the blood and the respiration of the air. For such as it is to have once drawn in the air and to have given it back, which we do every moment just the same is it with the whole respiratory power which thou did receive at thy birth yesterday and the day before, to give it back to the element from which thou did first draw it. Neither is transpiration, as in plants, a thing to be valued, nor respiration, as in domesticated animals and wild beasts, nor the receiving of impressions by the appearances of things, nor being moved by desires as puppets by strings, nor assembling in herds, nor being nourished by food. For this is just like the act of separating and part with the useless part of our food. What then is worth being valued to be received with clapping of hands? No, neither must we value the clapping of tongues, for the praise which comes from the many is a clapping of tongues. Suppose then that thou hast given up this worthless thing called fame. What remains that is worth valuing? This, in my opinion, to move thyself and to restrain thyself in conformity to thy proper constitution, to which end both all employments and arts lead. For every art aims at this, that the thing which has been made should be adapted to the work for which it has been made, and both the vine planter who looks after the vine, and the horsebreaker, and he who trains the dog seek this end, but the education and the teaching of youth aim at something, and this then is the value of the education and the teaching. And if this is, well, thou wilt not seek anything else. Will thou not cease to value many other things too? Then thou wilt be neither free nor sufficient for thy own happiness, nor without passion for of necessity. Thou must be envious, jealous, and suspicious of those who can take away those things, and plot against those who have that which is valued by thee of necessity. A man must be altogether in a state of perturbation who wants any of these things. And besides, he must often find fault with the gods. But to reverence and honor thy own mind will make thee content with thyself, and in harmony with society, and in agreement with the gods, that is, praising all that they give, and have ordered above, below all. Around are the movements of the elements, but the motion of virtue is in none of these. It is something more divine and advancing, by a way hardly observed. It goes happily on its road. How strangely men act! They will not praise those who are living at the same time and living with themselves, but to be themselves praised by posterity, by those whom they have never seen or ever will see. This they set much value on. But this is very much the same as if thou should be grieved, because those who have lived before thee did not praise thee. If a thing is difficult to be accomplished by thyself, do not think that it is impossible for man. But if anything is possible for man and conformable to his nature, think that this can be attained by thyself too. In the gymnastic exercises, suppose that a man has torn thee with his nails, and by dashing against thy head has inflicted the wound. Well, we neither show any signs of vexation, nor are we offended, nor do we suspect him afterwards as a treacherous fellow, and yet we are on our guard against him, not, however, as an enemy, nor yet with suspicion, but we quietly get out of his way, something like this: let thy behavior be all the other parts of life. Let us overlook many things in those who are like antagonists in the gymnasium, for it is in our power, as I said, to get out of the way, and to have no suspicion nor hatred. If any man is able to convince me and show me that I do not think or act right, I will gladly change, for I seek the truth by which no man was ever injured, but he is injured who abides in his error and ignorance. I do my duty, other things trouble me not, for they are either things without life, or things without reason, or things that have rambled and know not the way, as to the animals which have no reason. And generally all things and objects do thou, since thou hast reason, and they have none, make use of them with a generous and liberal spirit, but towards human beings, as they have reason, behave in a social spirit, and on all occasions call on the gods, and do not perplex thyself about the length of time in which thou shalt do this, for even 3 hours. So spent are music sufficient, Alexander the Macedonian and his groom by death were brought to the same state, for either they were received among the same seminal principles of the universe, or they were alike dispersed among the atoms. Consider how many things in the same indivisible time take place in each of us, things which concern the body and things which concern the soul. And so thou wilt not wonder if many more things, or rather all things which come into existence in that which is the one and all, which we call cosmos, exist in it at the same time. If any man should propose to thee the question how the name Antoninus is written, wouldst thou with a straining of the voice utter each letter? What then if they grow angry? Wilt thou be angry? 2. Wilt thou not go on with composure and number every letter? Just so. Then in this life also remember that every duty is made up of certain parts. These it is thy duty to observe, and without being disturbed or showing anger towards those who are angry with thee, to go on thy way and finish that which is set before thee. How cruel it is not to allow men to strive after the things which appear to them to be suitable to their nature and profitable, and yet in a manner thou dost not allow them to do this when thou art vexed, because they do wrong, for they are certainly moved towards things because they suppose them to be suitable to their nature and profitable to them. But it is not so. Teach them then and show them without being angry. Death is a sensation of the impressions through the senses, and of the pulling of the strings which move the appetites, and of the discursive movements of the thoughts, and of the service to the flesh. It is a shame for the soul to be first to give way in this life, when thy body does not give way. Take care that thou art not made into a Caesar, that thou art not dyed with this dye, for such things happen. Keep thyself, then, simple, good, pure, serious, free from affectation, a friend of justice, a worshipper of the gods, kind, affectionate, strenuous in all proper acts. Strive to continue to be such as philosophy wished, to make thee reverence the gods and help men short his life. There is only one fruit of this terrene life, a pious disposition in social acts. Do everything as a disciple of Antoninus. Remember his constancy in every act, which was conformable to reason, and his evenness in all things, and his piety, and the serenity of his countenance, and his sweetness, and his disregard of empty fame, and his efforts to understand things, and how he would never let anything pass without having first most carefully examined it and clearly understood it, and how he bore with those who blamed him unjustly without blaming them in return. How he did nothing in a hurry, and how he listened not to calumnies, and how exact an examiner of manners and actions he was, and not given to reproach people, nor timid, nor suspicious, nor a sophist, and with how little he was satisfied, such as lodging, bed dress, food servants, and how lavious and patient, and how he was able, on account of his sparing diet, to hold out to the evening, not even requiring to relieve himself by any evacuations, except at the usual hour, and his firmness and uniformity in his friendships, and how he tolerated freedom of speech in those who opposed his opinions, and the pleasure that he had when any man showed him anything better, and how religious he was without superstition, imitate all this, that thou mayest have as good a conscience when thy last hour comes, as he returned to thy sober senses, and call thyself back, and when thou hast roused thyself from sleep, and hast perceived that they were only dreams which troubled thee now in thy waking hours, look at these the things about thee as thou did look at those the dreams. I consist of a little body and a soul. Now to this little body all things are indifferent, for it is not able to perceive differences, but to the understanding those things only are indifferent, which are not the works of its own activity, but whatever things are the works of its own activity, all these are in its power. And of these, however, only those which are done with reference to the present, for as to the future and the past activities of the mind, even these are for the present indifferent. Neither the labor which the hand does, nor that of the foot, is contrary to nature, so long as the foot does the foot's work, and the hand the hand's. So then, neither to a man as a man is his labor contrary to nature, so long as it does the things of a man. But if the labor is not contrary to his nature, neither is it an evil to him. Dost thou not see how the handicraftsmen accommodate themselves up to a certain point to those who are not skilled in their craft? Nevertheless, they cling to the reason, the principles of their art, and do not endure to depart from it. Is it not strange if the architect and the physician shall have more respect to the reason, the principles of their own arts, than man to his own reason, which is common to him and the gods? Asia, Europe, are corners of the universe, all the sea a drop in the universe, AOS, a little clot of the universe, all the present time is a point in eternity. All things are little changeable, perishable. All things come from then, from that universal ruling power, either directly proceeding or by way of sequence. And accordingly, the lion's gaping jaws, and that which is poisonous, and every harmful thing as a thorn is mud, are after products of the grand and beautiful. Do not then imagine that they are of another kind from that which thou dost venerate, but form a just opinion of the source of all. He who has seen present things has seen all, both everything which has taken place from all eternity, and everything which will be for time without end. For all things are of one kin, and of one form. Frequently consider the connection of all things in the universe, and their relation to one another, for in a manner all things are implicated with one another, and all in this way are friendly to one another. For one thing comes in order after another, and this is by virtue of the active movement and mutual conspiration and the unity of the substance. Adapt thyself to the things with which thy lot has been cast, and the men among whom thou hast received thy portion, love them, but do it truly, sincerely. Every instrument, tool, vessel, if it does that for which it has been made, is well. And yet he who made it is not there, but in the things which are held together by nature. There is within, and there abides in them, the power which made them. Wherefore the more is it fit to reverence this power, and to think that if thou dost live and act according to its will, everything in thee is in conformity to intelligence, and thus also in the universe, the things which belong to it are in conformity to intelligence. Whatever of the things which are not within thy power thou shalt suppose to be good for thee or evil, it must of necessity be, that if such a bad thing befall thee, or the loss of such a good thing, thou wilt blame the gods and hate men too. Those who are the cause of the misfortune or the loss, or those who are suspected of being likely to be the cause. And indeed we do much injustice, because we make a difference between these things, because we do not regard these things as indifferent. But if we judge only those things which are in our power to be good or bad, there remains no reason either for finding fault with God or standing in a hostile attitude to man. We are all working together to one end, some with knowledge and design, and others without knowing what they do as men. Also, when they are asleep, of whom it is Heraclitus, I think, who says that they are laborers and cooperators in the things which take place in the universe, but men cooperate after different fashions, and even those cooperate abundantly who find fault with what happens, and those who try to oppose it and to hinder it. For the universe had need even of such men as these. It remains then for thee to understand among what kind of workmen thou placest thyself, for he who rules all things will certainly make a right use of thee, and he will receive thee among some part of the cooperators, and of those whose labors conduce to one end. But be not thou such a part as the mean and ridiculous verse in the play which Sippus speaks of, music. Does the sun undertake to do the work of the rain, or Aesculapius the work of the fruit-bearer of the earth? And how is it with respect to each of the stars? Are they not different? And yet they work together to the same end. If the gods have determined about me, and about the things which must happen to me, they have determined well, for it is not easy even to imagine a deity without forethought, and as to doing me harm, why should they have any desire towards that? For what advantage would result to them from this or to the whole, which is the special object of their providence? But if they have not determined about me individually, they have certainly determined about the whole, at least, and the things which happen by way of sequence in this general arrangement I ought to accept with pleasure, and to be content with them. But if they determine about nothing which it is wicked to believe, or if we do believe it, let us neither sacrifice, nor pray, nor swear by them, nor do anything else, which we do, as if the gods were present and lived with us. But if, however, the gods determine about none of the things which concern us, I am able to determine about myself. And I can inquire about that which is useful, and that is useful to every man, which is conformable to his own constitution and nature. But my nature is rational and social, and my city and country, so far as I am, Antoninus, is Rome. But so far as I am a man, it is the world. The things, then, which are useful to these cities are alone useful to me. Whatever happens to every man, this is for the interest of the universal. This might be sufficient. But further, thou wilt observe this also as a general truth, if thou dost observe that whatever is profitable to any man is profitable also to other men. But let the word profitable be taken here in the common sense, as said of things of the middle kind, neither good nor bad, as it happens to thee in the amphitheatre, and such places that the continual sight of the same things and the uniformity make the spectacle wearisome. So it is in the whole of life, for all things above, below are the same, and from the same. How long then think continually that all kinds of men and of all kinds of pursuits and of all nations are dead, so that thy thoughts come down even to Physan and Pheus and Organian. Now turn thy thoughts to the other kinds of men, to that place. Then we must remove where there are so many great orators and so many noble philosophers, Heraclitus, Pythagoras, Socrates, so many heroes of former days and so many generals after them, and tyrants. Besides these Eudoxus, Hipparchus, Archimedes, and other men of acute natural talents, great minds, lovers of labor, versatile, confident mockers even of the perishable and ephemeral life of man, as Manus and such as are like him. As to all these, consider that they have long been in the dust. What harm, then, is this to them, and what to those whose names are altogether unknown? One thing here is worth a great deal, to pass thy life in truth and justice, with a benevolent disposition, even to liars and unjust men. When thou wishest to delight thyself, think of the virtues of those who live with thee. For instance, the activity of one, and the modesty of another, and the liberality of a third, and some other good quality of a fourth. For nothing delights so much as the examples of the virtues, when they are exhibited in the morals of those who live with us, and present themselves in abundance, as far as is possible, wherefore we must keep them before us. Thou art not dissatisfied, I suppose, because thou waste only so many litra, and not 300. Be not dissatisfied. Then that thou must live only so many years, and not more, for as thou art satisfied with the amount of substance which has been assigned to thee, so be content with the time. Let us try to persuade them, men, but act even against their will when the principles of justice lead that way. If, however, any man by using force stands in thy way, betake thyself to contentment and tranquillity, and at the same time employ the hindrance towards the exercise of some other virtue. And remember that thy attempt was with a reservation that thou did not desire to do impossibilities. What then did thou desire some such effort as this? But thou attain thy object, if the things to which thou was moved are accomplished. He who loves fame considers another man's activity to be his own good, and he who loves pleasure his own sensations. But he who has understanding considers his own acts to be his own good. It is in our power to have no opinion about a thing, and not to be disturbed in our soul, for things themselves have no natural power to form our judgments. Accustom thyself to attend carefully to what is said by another, and as much as it is possible be in the speaker's mind that which is not good for the swarm, neither is it good for the bee. If sailors abuse the helmsman or the sick, the doctor, would they listen to anybody else? Or how could the helmsman secure the safety of those in the ship, or the doctor the health of those whom he attends? How many together with whom I came into the world are already gone out of it? To the jays honey tastes bitter, and to those bitten by mad dogs water causes fear. And to little children the ball is a fine thing. Why then am I angry? Dost thou think that a false opinion has less power than the bile in the jaste, or the poison in him who is bitten by a mad dog? No man will hinder thee from living according to the reason of thy own nature. Nothing will happen to thee contrary to the reason of the universal nature. What kind of people are those whom men wish to please, and for what objects, and by what kind of acts? How soon will time cover all things, and how many it has covered already? Music, Book S. What is badness? It is that which thou hast often seen, and on the occasion of everything which happens, keep this in mind, that it is that which thou hast often seen, everywhere up and down. Thou wilt find the same things with which the old histories are filled, those of the Middle Ages, and those of our own day with which cities and houses are filled. Now there is nothing new. All things are both familiar and short-lived. How can our principles become dead unless the impressions, thoughts which correspond to them are extinguished? But it is in thy power continuously to fan these thoughts into a flame. I can have that opinion about anything which I ought to have, if I can. Why am I disturbed? The things which are external to my mind have no relation at all to my mind. Let this be the state of thy effects, and thou standest erect. To recover thy life is in thy power. Look at things again, as thou did use to look at them, for in this consists the recovery of thy music life. The idle business of show plays on the stage, flocks of sheep herds, exercises with spears, a bone cast to little dogs, a bit of bread into fish ponds, laboring of ants and burden, carrying runnings about of frightened little mice puppets pulled by strings all alike. It is thy duty then in the midst of such things to show good humor and not a proud air, to understand, however, that every man is worth just so much as the things are worth about which he busies himself. In discourse thou must attend to what is said, and in every movement thou must observe what is doing, and in the one thou should see immediately to what end it refers, but in the other watch carefully what is the thing signified. Is my understanding sufficient for this, or not? If it is sufficient, I use it for the work as an instrument given by the universal nature. But if it is not sufficient, then either I retire from the work and give way to him who is able to do it better, unless there be some reason why I ought not to do so, or I do it as well as I can, taking to help me the man who with the aid of my ruling principle can do what is now fit and useful for the general good, for whatsoever, either by myself or with another, I can do ought to be directed to this, only to that which is useful and well suited to society. Music. How many, after being celebrated by fame, have been given up to oblivion, and how many who have celebrated the fame of others have long been music dead. Be not ashamed to be helped, for it is thy business to do thy duty like a soldier in the assault on a town. How then, if being lame thou cannot mount up on the battlements alone, but with the help of another? It is possible, let not future things disturb thee, for thou wilt come to them, if it shall be necessary, having with thee the same reason which now thou usest. For present things, all things are implicated with one another, and the bond is holy. And there is hardly anything unconnected with any other thing, for things have been coordinated, and they combined to form the same universe order. For there is one universe made up of all things, and one God who pervades all things in one substance and one law, one common reason in all intelligent animals, and one truth, if indeed there is also one perfection for all animals, which are of the same stock and participate in the same reason. Everything material soon disappears in the substance of the whole, and everything formal causal is very soon taken back into the universal reason. And the memory of everything is very soon overwhelmed in time to the rational animal. The same act is according to nature. And according to reason, be thou erect, or be made erect, just as it is with the members in those bodies which are united in one, so it is with rational beings which exist separate, for they have been constituted for one cooperation. And the perception of this will be more apparent to thee, if thou often sayest to thyself that I am a member of the system of rational beings. But if thou sayest that thou art, thou dost not yet love men from thy heart. Beneficence does not yet delight thee for its own sake. Thou still doest it barely as a thing of propriety, and not yet as doing good to thyself. Let there fall externally what will on the parts which can feel the effects of this fall, for those parts which have felt will complain if they choose. But unless I think that what has happened is an EVV, am not injured, and it is in my power not to think. So whatever anyone does or says, I must be good, just as if the gold or the emerald or the purple were always saying this. Whatever anyone does or says, I must be emerald and keep my color. The ruling faculty does not disturb itself. Does not frighten itself or cause itself pain. But if anyone else can frighten or pain, it let him do so. For the faculty itself will not by its own opinion turn itself into such ways. Let the body itself take care, if it can, that is suffer nothing, and let it speak, if it suffers. But the soul itself, that which is subject to fear, to pain, which has completely the power of forming an opinion about these things, will suffer nothing, for it will never deviate into such a judgment. The leading principle in itself wants nothing, unless it makes a want for itself. And therefore it is both free from perturbation and unimpeded, if it does not disturb and impede itself. Eudaimonia is a good demon or good thing. What then art thou doing here? O imagination, go away. I entreat thee by the gods as thou did come, for I want thee not, but thou art come according to thy old fashion. I am not angry with thee, only go. Music. Away is any man afraid of change. Why, what can take place without change? What then is more pleasing or more suitable to the universal nature? And canst thou take a bath unless the wood undergo a change? And can thou be nourished unless the food undergo a change? And can anything else that is useful be accomplished without change? Dost thou not see then that for thyself also to change is just the same and equally necessary for the universal nature through the universal substance? As through a furious torrent all bodies are carried, being by their nature united with and cooperating with the whole, as the parts of our body with one another, how many a Crius, how many a Socrates, how many an Epicus has time already swallowed up? And let the same thought occur to thee with reference to every man and thing. One thing only troubles me, lest I should do something which the constitution of man does not allow, or in the way which it does not allow, or what it does not allow. Now near is thy forgetfulness of all things, and near the forgetfulness of thee, by all it is peculiar to man to love even those who do wrong. And this happens, if when they do wrong, it occurs to thee that they are kinsmen, and that they do wrong through ignorance and unintentionally, and that soon both of you will die, and above all, that the wrongdoer has done thee no harm for. He has not made thy ruling faculty worse than it was before the universal nature out of the universal substance, as if it were wax, now molds a horse. And when it has broken this up, it uses the material for a tree, then for a man, then for something else. And each of these things subsists for a very short time. But it is no hardship for the vessel to be broken up, just as there was none in its being fastened together. A scowling look is altogether unnatural, when it is often assumed the result is that all cess dies away, and at last is so completely extinguished that it cannot be again lighted up at all. Try to conclude from this very fact that it is contrary to reason, for if even the perception of doing wrong shall depart, what reason is there for living any longer? Nature, which governs the whole, will soon change all things, which thou seest, and out of their substance will make other things, and again other things from the substance of them, in order that the world may be ever new, when a man has done thee any wrong, immediately consider with what opinion about good or evil he has done wrong. For when thou hast seen this, thou wilt pity him, and wilt neither wonder nor be angry. For either thou thyself thinkest the same thing to be good that he does, or another thing of the same kind, it is thy duty then to pardon him. But if thou dost not think such things to be good or evil, thou wilt more readily be well disposed to him who is in error. Think not so much of what thou hast not as of what thou hast, but of the things which thou hast select the best, and then reflect how eagerly they would have been sought. If thou had them not at the same time, however, take care that thou dost not, through being so pleased with them, accustom thyself to overvalue them, so as to be disturbed, if ever thou should not have. Music, then retire into thyself. The rational principle which rules has this nature, that it is content with itself, when it does what is just, and so secures tranquillity. Wipe out the imagination. Stop the pulling of the strings, confine thyself to the present. Understand well what happens either to thee or to another divide, and distribute every object into the causal formal, and the material. Think of thy last hour. Let the wrong which is done by a man stay there where the wrong was done. Direct thy attention to what is said. Let thy understanding enter into the things that are doing, and the things which do them. Adorn thyself with simplicity and modesty, and with indifference towards the things which lie between virtue and vice love. Mankind follow God. The poet says that law rules all, and it is enough to remember that law rules all about death. Whether it is a dispersion or a resolution into atoms or annihilation, it is either extinction or change about pain. The pain which is intolerable carries us off, but that which lasts a long time is tolerable, and the mind maintains its own tranquillity by retiring into itself. And the ruling faculty is not made worse, but the parts which are harmed by pain. Let them, if they can give their opinion about it, about fame. Look at the minds of those who seek fame, observe what they are, and what kind of things they avoid, and what kind of things they pursue, and consider that as the heaps of sand piled on one another hide the former sands, So in life, the events which go before are soon covered by those which come after, from Plato, the man who has an elevated mind and takes a view of all time and of all substance. Dost thou suppose it possible for him to think that human life is anything great? It is not possible. He said such a man then will think that death also is no evil, certainly not from anti. It is royal to do good and to be abused. It is a base thing for the countenance to be obedient and to regulate and compose itself as the mind commands, and for the mind not to be regulated and composed by itself. It is not right to vex ourselves at things, for they care not about it to the immortal gods in us. Give joy, life must be reaped like the ripe ears of corn. One man is born, another dies. If gods care not for me and for my children, there is a reason for it. For the good is with me, and the just, no joining others in their wailing, no violent emotion from Plato. But I would make this man a sufficient answer, which is this: thou sayest not well, if thou thinkest that a man who is good for anything at all ought to compute the hazard of life or death, and should not rather look to this only in all that he does, whether he is doing what is just or unjust, and the works of a good or a bad man. For thus it is men of Athens in truth, wherever a man has placed himself, thinking it the best place for him, or has been placed by a commander, there, in my opinion, he ought to stay, and to abide the hazard, taking nothing into the reckoning, either death or anything else, before the baseness of deserting his post. But my good friend, reflect whether that which is noble and good is not something different from saving and being saved for, as to a man living such or such a time, at least one who is really a man. Consider if this is not a thing to be dismissed from the thoughts, and there must be no love of life. But as to these matters, a man must entrust them to the deity, and believe what the women say, that no man can escape his destiny. The next inquiry being how he may best live the time that he has to live, look round at the courses of the stars, as if thou were going along with them, and constantly consider the changes of the elements into one another. For such thoughts purge away the filth of the terrene life. This is a fine saying of Plato, that he who is discoursing about men should look also at earthly things, as if he viewed them from some higher place, should look at them in their assemblies, armies, agricultural labors, marriages, treaties, births, deaths, noise of the courts of justice, desert places, various nations of barbarians' feasts, lamentations, markets, a mixture of all things, and an orderly combination of contraries. Consider the past, such great changes of political supremacy. Thou mayest foresee also the things which will be, for they will certainly be of like form, and it is not possible that they should deviate from the order of the things which take place now. Accordingly, to have contemplated human life for 40 years is the same as to have contemplated it for 10,000 years. For what more wilt thou see that which has grown from the earth to the earth, but that which has sprung from heavenly seed back to the heavenly realms returns? This is either a dissolution of the mutual involution of the atoms, or a similar dispersion of the UNS sentient music elements with food and drinks and cunning magic. Arts, turning the channels, CED, escape from death. The breeze which heaven has sent we must endure and toil without complaining. Another may be more expert in casting his opponent, but he is not more social, nor more modest, nor better disciplined to meet all that happens, nor more considerate with respect to the faults of his neighbors, where any work can be done conformably to the reason which is common to gods and men. There we have nothing to fear, for where we are able to get profit by means of the activity which is successful and proceeds according to our constitution, there no harm is to be. Music, suspected everywhere and at all times, it is in thy power piously to acquiesce in thy present condition, and to behave justly to those who are about thee, and to exert thy skill upon thy present thoughts, that nothing shall steal into them without being well examined. Do not look around thee to discover other men's ruling principles, but look straight to this, to what nature leads thee, both the universal nature through the things which happen to thee, and thy own nature through the acts which must be done by thee. But every being ought to do that which is according to its constitution, and all other things have been constituted for the sake of rational beings, just as among irrational things, the inferior for the sake of the superior, but the rational for the sake of one another. The prime principle then in man's constitution is the social, and the second is not to yield to the persuasions of the body, for it is the peculiar office of the rational and intelligent motion to circumscribe itself, and never to be overpowered either by the motion of the senses or of the appetites, for both are animal, but the intelligent motion claims superiority, and does not permit itself to be overpowered by the others, and with good reason, for it is formed by nature to use all of them. The third thing in the rational constitution is freedom from error and from deception. Let then the ruling principle holding fast to these things go straight on, and it has what is its own. Consider thyself to be dead, and to have completed thy life up to the present time, and live according to nature the remainder, which is allowed thee, love, that only which happens to thee, and is spun with the thread of thy destiny. For what is more suitable in everything which happens, keep before thy eyes those to whom the same things happened, and how they were vexed, and treated them as strange things, and found fault with them. And now, where are they? Nowhere. Why then dost thou too choose to act in the same way? And why dost thou not leave these agitations, which are foreign to nature, to those who cause them, and those who are moved by them? And why art thou not altogether intent upon the right way of making use of the things which happen to thee? For then thou wilt use them well, and they will be a material for thee to work on. Only attend to thyself, and resolve to be a good man in every act which thou doest. And remember, look within. Within is the fountain of good, and it will ever bubble up. If thou wilt ever dig, the body ought to be compact, and to show no irregularity either in motion or attitude, for what the mind shows in the face, by maintaining in it the expression of intelligence and propriety that ought to be required also in the whole body. But all of these things should be observed without affectation. The art of life is more like the wrestler's art than the dancer's in respect of this, that it should stand ready and firm to meet onsets which are sudden and unexpected. Constantly observe who those are whose approbation thou wishest to have, and what ruling principles they possess. For then thou wilt neither blame those who offend involuntarily, nor wilt thou want their approbation, if thou lookest to the sources of their opinions and appetites. Every soul, the philosopher says, is involuntarily deprived of truth. Consequently, in the same way, it is deprived of justice and temperance and benevolence, and everything of the kind. It is most necessary to bear this constantly in mind, for thus thou wilt be more gentle towards all in every pain. Let this thought be present, that there is no dishonor in it, nor does it make the governing intelligence worse, for it does not damage the intelligence either, so far as the intelligence is rational, or so far as it is social. Indeed, in the case of most pains, let this remark of Epicurus aid thee, that pain is neither intolerable nor everlasting, if thou bearest in mind that it has its limits, and if thou, and remember this too, that we do not perceive that many things which are disagreeable to us are the same as pain, such as excessive drowsiness, and the being scorched by heat, and the having no appetite. When then thou art discontented about any of these things, say to thyself that thou art yielding to music. Pain, take care not to feel towards the inhuman as they feel towards men. How do we know if Tagus was not superior in character to Socrates? For it is not enough that Socrates died a more noble death, and disputed more skillfully with the sophists, and passed the night in the cold with more endurance, and that when he was bid to arrest Leon of Salamis, he considered it more noble to refuse, and that he walked in a swaggering way in the streets, though as to this fact one may have great doubts if it was true, but we ought to inquire what kind of a soul it was that Socrates possessed, and if he was able to be content with being just towards men and pious towards the gods, neither idly vexed on account of men's villainy, nor yet making himself a slave to any man's ignorance, nor receiving as strange anything that fell to his share out of the universal, nor enduring it as intolerable, nor allowing his understanding to sympathize with the affects of the miserable flesh. Nature has not so mingled the intelligence with the composition of the body as not to have allowed thee the power of circumscribing thyself, and of bringing under subjection to thyself all that is thy own. For it is very possible to be a divine man, and to be recognized as such. By no one always bear this in mind. And another thing, too, that very little indeed is necessary for living a happy life, and because thou hast despaired of becoming a dialectician and skilled in the knowledge of nature, do not for this reason renounce the hope of being both free and modest, and social and obedient to God. It is in thy power to live free from all compulsion in the greatest tranquillity of mind, even if all the world cry out against thee as much as they choose, and even if wild beasts tear in pieces the members of this needed matter which has grown around thee. For what hinders the mind in the midst of all this from maintaining itself in tranquillity and in a just judgment of all surrounding things, and in a ready use of the objects which are presented to it, so that the judgment may say to the thing which falls under its observation, this thou art in substance, reality, though in men's opinion thou mayest appear to be of a different kind. And the youth shall say to that which falls under the hand, thou art the thing that I was seeking for. To me, that which presents itself is always a material for virtue, both rational and political, and in a word, for the exercise of art, which belongs to man or God, for everything which happens has a relationship either to God or man, and is neither new nor difficult to handle, but usual and apt matter to work on the perfection of moral character, consists in this, in passing every day as the last, and in being neither violently excited nor torpid, nor playing the hypocrite. The gods who are immortal are not vexed, because during so long a time they must tolerate continually men such as they are, and so many of them bad. And besides this, they also take care of them in all ways. But thou who art destined to end so soon, art thou wearied of enduring the bad? And this too, when thou art one of them, it is a ridiculous thing for a man not to fly from his own badness, which is indeed possible, but to fly from other men's badness, which is impossible, whatever the rational and political social faculty finds to be neither intelligent nor social. It properly judges to be inferior to itself when thou hast done a good act and another has received it. Why dost thou look for a third thing besides thee, as fools do, either to have the reputation of having done a good act or to obtain a return? No man is tired of receiving what's useful, but it is useful to act according to nature. Do not then be tired of receiving what is useful by doing it to others. The nature of the all moved to make the universe. But now either everything that takes place comes by way of consequence or continuity, or even the chief things towards which the ruling power of the universe directs its own movement are governed by no rational principle. If this is remembered, it will make thee more tranquil in many things. Music, book. Music. 8. This reflection also tends to the removal of the desire of empty fame, that it is no longer in thy power to have lived the whole of thy life, or at least thy life from thy youth upwards, like a philosopher, but both to many others and to thyself, it is plain that thou art far from philosophy. Thou hast fallen into disorder then, so that it is no longer easy for thee to get the reputation of a philosopher, and thy plan of life also opposes it. If then thou hast truly seen where the matter lies, throw away the thought how thou shalt seem to others, and be content. If thou shalt live the rest of thy life in such wise as thy nature wills observe, then what it wills, and let nothing else distract thee, for thou hast had experience of many wanderings, without having found happiness anywhere, not in syllogisms, nor in wealth, nor in reputation, nor in enjoyment, nor anywhere. Where is it then in doing what man's nature requires? How then shall a man do this, if he has principles from which come his effects and his acts? What principles? Those which relate to good and bad, the belief that there is nothing good for man which does not make him just temperate, manly, free, and that there is nothing bad which does not do the contrary to what has been music mentioned on the occasion of every act. Ask thyself, how is this with respect to me? Shall I repent of it a little time, and I am dead, and all is gone? What more do I seek if what I am now doing is work of an intelligent living being and a social being, and one who is under the same law with God? Music, Alexander and Cal and Pompus, what are they in comparison with Diogenes and Heraclitus and Socrates? For they were acquainted with things and their causes, forms, and their matter, and the ruling principles of these men were the same, but as to the others, how many things had they to care for, and to how many things were they slaves? Consider that men will do the same things, nevertheless, even though thou shouldst burst. Music. This is the chief thing. Be not perturbed, for all things are according to the nature of the universal. And in a little time there will be nobody and nowhere like Hadrian and Augustus. In the next place, having fixed thy eyes steadily on thy business, look at it, and at the same time remembering that it is thy duty to be a good man, and what man's nature demands do, that without turning aside and speak, as it seems to the most just, only let it be with a good disposition, and with modesty, and without hypocrisy. The nature of the universal has this work to do, to remove to that place the things which are in this, to change them, to take them away hence, and to carry them there. All things are change. Yet we need not fear anything new. All things are familiar to us, but the distribution of them still remains the same. Every nature is contented with itself when it goes on its way well, and the rational nature goes on its way well when in its thoughts it ascends to nothing false or uncertain, and when it directs its movements to social acts only, and when it confines its desires and aversions to the things which are in its power, and when it is satisfied with everything that is assigned to it by the common nature. For of this common nature every particular nature is a part, as the nature of the leaf is a part of the nature of the plant, except that in the plant the nature of the leaf is part of a nature which has not perception or reason, and is subject to be impeded. But the nature of man is part of a nature which is not subject to impediments, and is intelligent and just, since it gives to everything in equal portions, and according to its worth, time, substance, cause, form, activity, and incident. But examine not to discover that any one thing compared with any other single thing is equal in all respects, but by taking all the parts together of one thing, and comparing them with all the parts together of music. Another thou hast not leisure or ability to read, but thou hast leisure or ability to check arrogance. Thou hast leisure to be superior to pleasure and pain. Thou has leisure to be superior to love of fame, and not to be vexed at stupid and ungrateful people, and even to care for them. Music. Let no man any longer hear thee finding fault with the court, life, or with thy own repentance, is a kind of self-reproof for having neglected something useful. But that which is good must be something useful, and the perfect good man should look after it. but no such man would ever repent of having refused any sensual pleasure, then is neither good nor useful, this thing. What is it in itself, and its own constitution? What is its substance and material, and what its causal nature or form, and what is it doing in the world, and how long does it subsist when thou risest from sleep with reluctance? Remember that it is according to thy constitution and according to human nature to perform social acts. But sleeping is common also to irrational animals. But that which is, according to each individual's nature, is also more peculiarly its own and more suitable to its nature, and indeed also more agreeable constantly, and if it be possible on the occasion of every impression on the soul. Apply to it the principles of physic, of ethic, and of music, dialectic. Whatever man thou meetest with, immediately say to thyself, what opinions has this man about good and bad? For if with respect to pleasure and pain, and the causes of each, and with respect to fame and ignominy, death and life, he has such and such opinions, it will seem nothing wonderful or strange to me if he does such and such things, and I shall bear in mind that he is compelled to do so. Remember that as it is a shame to be surprised if the fig tree produces figs, so it is to be surprised if the world produces such and such things of which it is productive, and for the physician and the helmsman, it is a shame to be surprised if a man has a fever, or if the wind is unfavorable. Remember that to change thy opinion and to follow him who corrects thy error is as consistent with freedom as it is to persist in thy error, for it is thy own, the activity which is exerted according to thy own movement and judgment, and indeed according to thy own understanding too. If a thing is in thy own power, why dost thou do it? But if it is in the power of another, whom dost thou blame? The Adam's chance, or the gods? Both are foolish. Thou must blame nobody, for if thou canst correct that which is the cause. But if thou seest not, do this correct, at least the thing itself. But if thou canst not do even this, of what use is it to thee to find fault? For nothing should be done without a music purpose. That which has died falls not out of the universe. If it stays here, it also changes here, and is dissolved into its proper parts, which are elements of the universe and of thyself. And these two change, and they murmur, not everything exists, for some end, a horse, a vine, why dost thou wonder? Even the sun will say, I am, for some purpose, and the rest of the gods will say the same. For what purpose then art thou to enjoy pleasure? See if common sense allows this. Nature has had regard in everything no less to the end than to the beginning and the continuance. Just like the man who throws up a ball, what good is it then for the ball to be thrown up, or harm for it to come down, or even to have fallen? And what good is it to the bubble while it holds together, or what harm when it is burst? The same may be said of a light. Also, turn it the body inside out and see what kind of thing it is, and when it has grown old, what kind of thing it becomes. And when it is diseased, short-lived are both the praiser and the praised, and the rememberer and the remembered, and all of this in a nook of this part of the world, and not even here do all agree, no, not anyone with himself, and the whole earth too, is a point to tend to the matter which is before thee, whether it is an opinion or an act or a word. Thou sufferest this justly, for thou choosest rather to become good tomorrow than to be good today. Am I doing anything? I do it with reference to the good of mankind. Does anything happen to me? I receive it and refer it to the gods and the source of all things, from which all that happens is derived, such as bathing appears to the oil, sweat, dirt, filthy water, all things disgusting. So is every part of life. And everything Lucilla saw, Varus died, and then Lucilla died, Secunda saw Maximus die, and then Secunda died, Epion Conus saw Demas die, and Epion Canus died, Antoninus saw Faustina die, and then Antoninus died, such as everything ceased, saw Hadrian die, and then Cell died, and those sharp-witted men, either seers or men inflated with pride, where are they, for instance? The sharp-witted men, Carax and Demetrius the Platonist, and Udon, and anyone else like them all. Ephemeral, dead long ago. Some indeed have not been remembered even for a short time, and others have become the heroes of fables, and again others have disappeared even from fables. Remember this then, that this little compound thyself must either be dissolved, or thy poor breath must be extinguished, or be removed and placed elsewhere. It is satisfaction to a man to do the proper works of a man. Now, it is the proper work of a man to be benevolent to his own kind, to despise the movements of the senses, to form a just judgment of plausible appearances, and to take a survey of the nature of the universe and of the things which happen in it. There are three relations between thee and other things, the one to the body which surrounds thee, the second to the divine cause from which all things come to all, and the third to those who live with thee. Pain is either an evil to the body, then let the body say what it thinks of it, or to the soul. But it is in the power of the soul to maintain its own serenity and tranquility, and not to think that pain is an evil, for every judgment and movement and desire and aversion is within, and no evil ascends. So music high, wipe out thy imaginations, by often saying to thyself, now it is in my power to let no badness be in this soul, nor desire, nor any perturbation at all, but looking at all things, I see what is their nature, and I use each according to its value. Remember this power which thou hast from nature. Speak both in the Senate and to every man, whoever he may be, appropriately, not with any affectation. Use plain discourse. Augustus's court, wife, daughter, descendants, ancestors, sister, Agria, kinsmen, intimates, friends, Aros, Maius, physicians and sacrificing priests. The whole court is dead. Then turn to the rest, not considering the death of a single man, but of a whole race. As of the Pompey and that which is inscribed on the tombs, the last of his race, then consider what trouble those before them have had, that they might leave a successor, and then that of necessity. Someone must be the last again. Here considered the death of a whole race. Music, it is thy duty to order thy life well in every single act, and if every act does its duty as far as is possible, be content, and no one is able to hinder thee, so that each act shall not do its duty, but something external will stand in the way. Nothing will stand in the way of thy acting justly and soberly and considerately, but perhaps some other active power will be hindered well, but by acquiescing in the hindrance, and by being content to transfer thy efforts to that which is allowed, another opportunity of action is immediately put before thee in place of that which was hindered, and one which will adapt itself to this ordering of which we are speaking. Receive wealth or prosperity without arrogance, and be ready to let it go. If thou did ever see a hand cut off, or a foot or a head lying anywhere apart from the rest of the body, such does a man make himself as far as he can, who is not content with what happens, and separates himself from others. Or does anything unsocial suppose that thou hast detached thyself from the natural unity, for thou was made by nature apart. But now thou hast cut thyself off. Yet here there is this beautiful provision, that it is in thy power again to unite thyself. God has allowed this to no other part after it has been separated and cut under to come together again. But consider the kindness by which he has distinguished man, for he has put it in his power not to be separated at all from the universal. And when he has been separated, he has allowed him to return and to be united and to resume his place as a music part, as the nature of the universal has given to every rational being all the other powers that it has. So we have received from it this power also, for as the universal nature converts and fixes in its predestined place everything which stands in the way and opposes it and makes such things a part of itself, so also the rational animal is able to make every hindrance its own material, and to use it for such purposes as it may have. music, designed, do not disturb thyself by thinking of the whole of thy life. Let not thy thoughts at once embrace all the various troubles which thou mayest expect to befall thee, but on every occasion ask thyself, what is there in this which is intolerable and past bearing? For thou wilt be ashamed to confess. In the next place, remember that neither the future nor the past pains thee, but only the present. But this is reduced to a very little if thou only circumscribes it and chest thy mind. If it is unable to hold out against even this, does Panthea or Pergamus now sit by the tomb of Verus? Does Chorus or Diamus sit by the tomb of Hadrian? That would be ridiculous. Well, suppose they did sit there. Would the dead be conscious of it? And if the dead were conscious, would they be pleased? And if they were pleased, would that make them immortal? Was it not in the order of destiny that these persons too should first become old? Women and old men, and then die? What then would those do after these were dead? All this is foul smell and blood in a bag. If thou can see, sharp look, and judge wisely. Says the philosopher, in the constitution of the rational animal, I see no virtue which is opposed to justice, but I see a virtue which is opposed to love of pleasure, and that is temperance. If thou takest away thy opinion about that which appears to give thee pain, thou thyself standest in perfect security. Who is this self? The reason. But I am not reason, be it. So let then the reason itself not trouble itself, but if any other part of these suffers, let it have its own opinion about music itself. Hindrance to the perceptions of sense is an evil to the animal nature. Hindrance to the movements, desires, is equally an evil to the animal nature. And something else also is equally an impediment and an evil to the constitution of plants. So then, that which is a hindrance to the intelligence is an evil to the intelligent nature. Apply all these things then to thyself. Does pain or sensuous pleasure affect thee? The senses will look to that has any obstacle oppose thee in thy efforts towards an object, if indeed thou was making this effort absolutely unconditionally, or without any reservation. Certainly, this obstacle is an evil to thee considered as a rational animal. But if thou takest into consideration the usual course of things, thou hast not yet been injured, nor even impeded the things, however, which are proper to the understanding. No other man is used to impede, for neither fire, nor iron, nor tyrant, nor abuse touches it in any way. When it has been made a sphere, it continues a sphere. It is not fit that I should give myself pain, for I have never intentionally given pain. Even to another different things delight different people. But it is my delight to keep the ruling faculty sound without turning away either from any man or from any of the things which happen to men, but looking at and receiving all with welcome eyes and using everything according to its value. See that thou secure this present time to thyself. For those who rather pursue posthumous fame do consider that the men of aftertime will be exactly such as these whom they cannot bear now. And both are mortal, and what is it in any way to thee, if these men of aftertime utter this or that sound, or have this or that opinion about thee? Take me and cast me where thou wilt, for there I shall keep my divine part tranquil that is content. If it can feel and act conformably to its proper constitution, is this change of place sufficient reason why my soul should be unhappy, and worse than it was depressed, expanded, shrinking, affrighted? And what wilt thou find which is sufficient reason for this? Nothing can happen to any man which is not a human accident, nor to an ox, which is not according to the nature of an ox, nor to a vine which is not according to the nature of a vine, nor to a stone which is not proper to a stone. If then there happens to each thing both what is usual and natural, why shouldst thou complain? For the common nature brings nothing which may not be borne by thee. If thou art pained by any external thing, it is not this thing that disturbs thee, but thy own judgment about it, and it is in thy power to wipe out this judgment now. But if anything in thy own disposition gives thee pain, who hinders thee from correcting thy opinion, and even if thou art pained because thou art not doing some particular thing which seems to thee to be right, why dost thou not rather act than complain? But some insuperable obstacle is in the way. Do not be grieved, then, for the cause of its not being done depends not on thee, but it is not worth while to live. If this cannot be done, take thy departure, then from life contentedly, just as he dies who is in full activity, and well pleased too with the things which are obstacles. Remember that the ruling faculty is invincible. When self-collected, it is satisfied with itself. If it does nothing, which it does not choose to do, even if it resists from mere obstinacy, what then will it be when it forms a judgment about anything aided by reason, and deliberately? Therefore the mind which is free from passions is a citadel, for man has nothing more secure to which he can fly for refuge, and for the future be inexpugnable. He then who has not seen this is an ignorant man, but he who has seen it and does not fly to this refuge is music. Unhappy, say nothing more to thyself than what the first appearances report. Suppose that it has been reported to thee that a certain person speaks ill of thee. This has been reported, but that thou hast been injured, that has not been reported. I see that my child is sick. I do see, but that he is in danger. I do not see thus. Then always abide by the first appearances, and add nothing thyself from within, and then nothing happens to thee. Or rather, add something like a man who knows everything that happens in the music world. A cucumber is bitter, throw it away. There are briars in the road, turn. Aside from them, this is enough. Do not add, and why were such things made in the world? For thou wilt be ridiculed by a man who is acquainted with nature, as thou would be ridiculed by a carpenter and shoemaker, if thou did find fault, because thou seest in their workshop shavings and cuting from the things which they make, and yet they have places into which they can throw these shavings and cuting, and the universal nature has no external space. But the wondrous part of her art is that though she has circumscribed herself, everything within her, which appears to decay and to grow old and to be useless, she changes into herself, and again makes other new things from these very same, so that she requires neither substance from without, nor wants a place into which she may cast that which decays. She's content then with her own space, and her own matter, and her own art. Neither in thy actions be sluggish, nor in thy conversation without method, nor wandering in thy thoughts, nor let there be in thy soul inward contention, nor external effusion, nor in life be so busy as to have no music, leisure. Suppose that men kill thee, cut thee in pieces, curse thee, what then can these things do to prevent thy mind from remaining pure-wise, sober? Just for instance, if a man should stand by a limpid, pure spring and curse it, the spring never ceases sending up potable water. And if he should cast clay into it, or filth, it will speedily disperse them and wash them out, and will not be at all polluted. How then shalt thou possess a perpetual fountain, and not a mere well, by forming thyself hourly to freedom, conjoined with contentment, simplicity, and modesty? He who does not know what the world is, does not know where he is, and he who does not know for what purpose the world exists, does not know who he is, nor what the world is. But he who has failed in any one of these things could not even say for what purpose he exists himself. What then dost thou think of him who avoids or seeks the praise of those who applaud, of men who know not either where they are or who they are? Dost thou wish to be praised by a man who curses himself thrice every hour? Wouldst thou wish to please a man who does not please himself? Does a man please himself who repents of nearly everything, that he, music, does no longer let thy breathing only act in concert with the air which surrounds thee, but let thy intelligence also now be in harmony with the intelligence which embraces all things? For the intelligent power is no less diffused in all parts and pervades all things for him who is willing to draw it to him, than the aerial power for him who is able to respire it generally. Wickedness does no harm at all to the universe, and particularly the wickedness of one man does no harm to another. It's only harmful to him who has it in his power to be released from it as soon as he shall choose to my own free will. The free will of my neighbor is just as indifferent as his poor breath and flesh. For though we are made, especially for the sake of one another, still the ruling power of each of us has its own office, for otherwise my neighbor's wickedness would be my harm, which God has not willed, in order that my unhappiness may not depend on another the son of, appears to be poured down, and in all directions. Indeed, it is diffused, yet it is not diffused, for this diffusion is extension. Accordingly, its rays are called extensions, because they are extended. But one may judge what kind of a thing a ray is if he looks at the sun's light passing through a narrow opening into a darkened room, for it is extended in a right line, and as it were, is divided when it meets with any solid body which stands in the way and intercepts the air beyond. But there the light remains fixed, and does not glide or fall off. Such then ought to be the outpouring and diffusion of the understanding, and it should in no way be an effusion, but an extension, and it should make no violent or impetuous collision with the obstacles which are in its way, nor yet fall down, but be fixed, and enlighten that which receives it for a body, will deprive itself of the illumination if it does not admit it. He who fears death either fears the loss of sensation or a different kind of sensation. But if thou shalt have no sensation, neither wilt thou feel any harm, and if thou shalt acquire another kind of sensation, thou wilt be a different kind of living being, and thou wilt not cease to live. Men exist for the sake of one another. Teach them then, or bear with them in one way. An arrow moves in another way. The mind indeed, both when it exercises caution and when it is employed about inquiry, moves straight onward, not the less, and to its object enter into every man's ruling faculty, and also let every other man enter into thine book, music. Nine, he who acts unjustly acts impiously, for since the universal nature has made rational animals for the sake of one another, to help one another according to their deserts, but in no way to injure one another, he who transgresses her will is clearly guilty of impiety towards the highest divinity. And he too who lies is guilty of impiety to the same divinity. For the universal nature is the nature of things that are, and things that are have a relation to all things that come into existence. And further, this universal nature is named truth, and is the prime cause of all things that are true. He then who lies intentionally is guilty of impiety, inasmuch as he acts unjustly by deceiving, and he also who lies unintentionally, inasmuch as he is at variance with the universal nature, and inasmuch as he disturbs the order by fighting against the nature of the world, for he fights against it, who is moved of himself to that which is contrary to truth, for he had received powers from nature, through the neglect of which he is not able now to distinguish falsehood from truth. And indeed, he who pursues pleasure as good and avoids pain as evil is guilty of impiety, for of necessity such a man must often find fault with the universal nature, alleging that it assigns things to the bad and the good contrary to their deserts, because frequently the bad are in the enjoyment of pleasure and possess the things which procure pleasure, but the good have pain for their share, and the things which cause pain. And further, he who is afraid of pain will sometimes also be afraid of some of the things which will happen in the world, and even this is impiety. And he who pursues pleasure will not abstain from injustice, and this is plainly impiety. Now with respect to the things towards which the universal nature is equally affected, for it would not have made both, unless it was equally affected towards both. Towards these, they who wish to follow nature should be of the same mind, with it and equally affected with respect to pain, then in pleasure or death, in life or honor and dishonor, which the universal nature employs equally. Whoever is not equally affected is manifestly acting impiously. And I say that the universal nature employs them equally, instead of saying that they happen alike to those who are produced in continuous series and to those who come after them, by virtue of a certain original movement of providence, according to which it moved from a certain beginning to this ordering of things, having conceived certain principles of the things which were to be, and having determined powers productive of beings and of changes, and of such like, music, successions. It would be a man's happiest lot to depart from mankind without having had any taste of lying and hypocrisy and luxury and pride. However, to breathe out one's life when a man has had enough of these things is the next best voyage. As the saying is, hast thou determined to abide with vice, and has not experience yet induced thee to fly from this pestilence? For the destruction of the understanding is a pestilence much more indeed than any such corruption and change of this atmosphere which surrounds us. For this corruption is a pestilence of animals, so far as they are animals. But the other is a pestilence of men, so far as they are music. Men do not despise death, but be well content with it, since this too is one of those things which nature wills for such as it is to be young and to grow old and to increase and to reach maturity and to have teeth and beard and gray hairs and to beget and to be pregnant and to bring forth and all the other natural operations which the seasons of thy life bring, such also is dissolution. This, then, is consistent with the character of a reflecting man, to be neither careless, nor impatient, nor contemptuous with respect to death, but to wait for it as one of the operations of nature, as thou now waitest for the time when the child shall come out of thy wife's womb. So be ready for the time when thy soul shall fall out of this envelope. But if thou requirest also a vulgar kind of comfort which shall reach thy heart, thou wilt be made best reconciled to death by observing the objects from which thou art going to be removed, and the morals of those with whom thy soul will no longer be mingled, for it is no way right to be offended with men, but it is thy duty to care for them and to bear with them gently, and yet to remember that thy departure will be not from men who have the same principles as thyself. For this is the only thing, if there be any, which could draw us the contrary way, and attach us to life, to be permitted to live with those who have the same principles as ourselves. But now thou seest how great is the trouble arising from the discordance of those who live together, so that thou may us say, come quick. O death, lest perchance I too should forget myself. He who does wrong against himself. He who acts unjustly to himself, because he makes himself bad. He often acts unjustly who does not do a certain thing. Not only he who does a certain thing, thy present opinion founded on understanding, and thy present conduct directed to social good, and thy present disposition of contentment with everything which happens. That is enough. Wipe out imagination, check desire, extinguish appetite, keep the ruling faculty in its own power. Among the animals which have not reason, one life is distributed, but among reasonable animals, one intelligent soul is distributed, just as there is one earth of all things which are of an earthy nature. And we see by one light and breathe one air, all of us that have the faculty of vision and all that have life. All things which participate in anything which is common to them all move towards that which is of the same kind with themselves. Everything which is earthy turns towards the earth. Everything which is liquid flows together, and everything which is of an aerial kind does the same, so that they require something to keep them asunder, and the application of force fire indeed moves upwards on account of the elemental fire, but it is so ready to be kindled together with all the fire which is here, that even every substance which is somewhat dry is easily ignited, because there is less mingled with it of that which is a hindrance to ignition. Accordingly, then everything also which participates in the common intelligent nature moves in like manner towards that which is of the same kind with itself, or moves even more, for so much as it is superior in comparison with all other things in the same re, also is it more ready to mingle with and to be fused with that which is akin to it. Accordingly, among animals devoid of reason, we find swarms of bees and herds of cattle, and a nurture of young birds, and in a manner loves, for even in animals there are souls, and that power which brings them together is seen to exert itself in the superior degree, and in such a way as never has been observed in plants, nor in stones, nor in trees. But in rational animals there are political communities, and friendships, and families, and meetings of people, and in wars, treaties, and armistices. But in the things which are still superior, even though they are separated from one another, unity in a manner exists, as in the stars. Thus the ascent to the higher degree is able to produce a sympathy even in things which are separated. See, then what now takes place, for only intelligent animals have now forgotten this mutual desire and inclination, and in them alone the property of flowing together is not seen, but still, though men strive to avoid this union, they are caught and held by it, for their nature is too strong for them. And thou wilt see what I say, if thou only observe sooner, then will one find anything earthy which comes in contact with no earthy thing, then a man altogether separated from other men, both man and God. And the universe produce fruit at the proper seasons. Each produces it, but if usage has especially fixed these terms to the vine and like things, this is nothing. Reason produces fruit, both for all and for itself. And there are produced from it other things of the same kind as reason itself. If thou art able correct by teaching those who do wrong, but if thou cannot remember that indulgence is given to thee for this purpose, and the gods too are indulgent to such persons, and for some purposes they even help them to get health, wealth, reputation, so kind they are, and it is in thy power also, or say who hinders thee labor, not as one who is wretched, nor yet as one who would be pied or admired, but direct thy will to one thing only, to put thyself in motion, and to check thyself. As the social reason requires music, today I have got out of all trouble, or rather, I have cast out all trouble, for it was not outside, but within, and in my opinions, all things are the same, familiar in experience, and ephemeral in time, and worthless in a matter. Everything now is just as it was in the time of those whom we have buried. Things stand outside of us themselves, by themselves, neither knowing aught of themselves, nor expressing any judgment. What is it, then, which does judge about them? The ruling faculty, not in passivity, but in activity, lie the evil and the good of the rational social animal, just as his virtue and his vice lie not in passivity, but in activity. For the stone which has been thrown up, it is no evil to come down, nor indeed any good to have been carried up, penetrate inward into men's leading principles, and thou wilt see what judges thou art afraid of, and what kind of judges they are of themselves. All things are changing, and thou thyself art in continuous mutation, and in a manner in continuous destruction, and the whole universe too. It is thy duty to leave another man's wrongful act, there where it is termination of activity, say from movement and opinion, and in a sense, their death is no evil. Turn thy thoughts now to the consideration of thy life as a child, as a youth, thy manhood, thy old age. For in these also every change was a death. Is this anything to fear? Turn thy thoughts now to thy life under thy grandfather, then to thy life under thy mother, then to thy life under thy father. And as thou findest many other differences and changes and terminations, ask thyself, is this anything to fear in like manner then neither are the termination and cessation and change of thy whole life a thing to be afraid, music, of hasten to examine thy own ruling faculty and that of the universe and that of thy neighbor, thy own, that thou mayest make it just, and that of the universe, that thou mayest remember of what thou art, and that of thy neighbor, that thou mayest know whether he has acted ignorantly or with knowledge, and that thou mayest also consider that his ruling faculty is akin to thine, as thou thyself art a component part of a social system. So let every act of thine be a component part of social life. Whatever act of thine then has no reference either immediately or remotely to a social end, this tears asunder thy life and does not allow it to be one, and it is of the nature of a mutiny. Just as when in a popular assembly a man acting by himself stands apart from the general agreement quarrels of little children and their sports and poor spirits, caring about dead bodies such as everything. And so what is exhibited in the representation of the mansions of the dead strikes our eyes more clearly, examine into the quality of the form of an object, and detach it altogether from its material part, and then contemplate it, then determine the time the longest, which a thing of this peculiar form is naturally made to, or music. Endure thou hast endured infinite troubles through not being contented with thy ruling faculty, when it does the things which it is constituted by nature to do. But enough of this, when another blames thee or hates thee, or when men say about thee anything injurious, approach their poor souls, penetrate within, and see what kind of men they are. Thou wilt discover that there is no reason to take any trouble that these men may have this or that opinion about thee. However, thou must be well disposed towards them, for by nature they are friends, and the gods too. Aid them in all ways, by dreams, by signs toward the attainment of those things on which they set a value. The periodic movements of the universe are the same up and down from age to age, and either the universal intelligence puts itself in motion for every separate effect. And if this is so, be thou content with that which is the result of its activity, or it puts itself in motion once, and everything else comes by way of sequence in a manner, or indivisible elements are the origin of all things. In a word, if there is a God, all is well, and if chance rules do not, thou also be governed by it. Soon will the earth cover us all, then the earth too will change, and the things also which result from change will continue to change forever, and these again forever. For if a man reflects on the changes and transformations which follow one another like wave after wave, and their rapidity, he will despise everything which is perishable. The universal cause is like a winter torrent. It carries everything along with it. But how worthless are all these poor people who are engaged in matters political, and as they suppose are playing the philosopher, all dialers. Well then, man, do what nature now requires. Set thyself in motion, if it is in thy power, and do not look about thee to see if anyone will observe it, nor yet expect Plato's republic, but be content if the smallest thing goes on well, and consider such an event to be no small matter, for who can change men's opinions? And without a change of opinions, what else is there than the slavery of men who groan while they pretend to obey? Come now and tell me of Alexander and Philip and Demetrius of Pharum. They themselves shall judge whether they discovered what the common nature required, and train themselves accordingly. But if they acted like tragedy heroes, no one has condemned me to imitate them. Simple and modest is the work of philosophy. Draw me not aside to indolence and pride. Look down from above on the countless herds of men, and their countless solemnities, and the infinitely varied voyaging in storms and calms, and the differences among those who are born, who live together and die, and consider, too, the life lived by others in olden time, and the life of those who will live after thee, and the life now lived among barbarous nations, and how many know not even thy name, and how many will soon forget it, and how they who perhaps now are praising thee that will very soon blame thee, and that neither a posthumous name is of any value, nor reputation, nor anything. Music, else let there be freedom from perturbations with respect to the things which come from the external cause, and let there be justice in the things done by virtue of the internal cause. That is, let there be movement and action terminating in this, in social acts. For this is according to thy nature. Thou canst remove out of the way many useless things among those which disturb thee, for they lie entirely in thy opinion, and thou wilt then gain for thyself ample space by comprehending the whole universe in thy mind, and by contemplating the eternity of time, and observing the rapid change of every several thing, how short is the time from birth to dissolution, and the illimitable time before birth, as well as the equally boundless time after dissolution. All that thou seest will quickly perish, and those who have been spectators of its dissolution will very soon perish too. And he who dies at the extremest old age will be brought into the same condition with him who died prematurely. What are these men's leading principles, and about what kind of things are they busy, and for what kind of reasons do they love and honor? Imagine that thou seest their poor souls laid bare when they think that they do harm by their blame, or good by their praise. What in music, idea loss, is nothing else than change, but the universal nature delights in change and in obedience to her. All things are now done well, and from eternity have been done in like form, and will be such to time without end. What then dost thou say that all things have been, and all things always will be bad, and that no power has ever been found in so many gods to rectify these things? But the world has been condemned to be found in never-ceasing evil, the rottenness of the matter, which is the foundation of everything, water, dust, bones, filth, or again, marble rocks, the colossi of the earth, and gold and silver, the sediments and garments, only bits of hair and purple-dye blood, and everything else is of the same kind, and that which is of the nature of breath is also another thing of the same kind, changing from this to that. Enough of this wretched life and murmuring and apish tricks. Why art thou disturbed? What is there new in this? What unsettles thee? Is it the form of the thing? Look at it. Or is it the matter? Look at it. But besides these there is nothing towards the gods. Then now become at last more simple and better. It is the same whether we examine these things for 100 years or 3. If any man has done wrong, the harm is his own, but perhaps he has not done wrong either. All things proceed from one intelligent source and come together as in one body, and the part ought not to find fault with what is done for the benefit of the whole. Or there are only atoms, and nothing else than mixture and dispersion. Why then art thou disturbed, say, to the ruling faculty? Art thou dead? Art thou corrupted? Art thou playing the hypocrite? Art thou become a beast? Dost thou herd and feed with the music? Rest, either the gods have no power, or they have power. If then they have no power, why dost thou pray to them? But if they have power, why dost thou not pray for them to give thee the faculty of not fearing any of the things which thou fearest, or of not desiring any of the things which thou desirest, or not being pained at anything rather than pray that any of these things should not happen or happen? For certainly, if they can cooperate with men, they can cooperate for these purposes. But perhaps thou wilt say, the gods have placed them in thy power. Well, then is it not better to use what is in thy power like a free man than to desire in a slavish and abject way what is not in thy power? And who has told thee that the gods do not aid us, even in the things which are in our power? Begin then to pray for such things, and thou wilt see one man prays thus, How shall I be able to lie with that woman? Do thou pray thus. How shall I not desire to lie with her? Another praise. Thus, how shall I be released from this? Another praise. How shall I not desire to be released? Another, thus, how shall I not lose my little son? Thou thus, how shall I not be afraid to lose him? In fine, turn thy prayers this way, and see what comes. Epicurus says in my sickness, my conversation was not about my bodily sufferings, nor says he did I talk on such subjects to those who visited me, but I continued to discourse on the nature of things as before, keeping to this main point, how the mind, while participating in such movements as go on in the poor flesh, shall be free from per rations and maintain its proper good. Nor did I, he says, give the physicians an opportunity of putting on solemn looks as if they were doing something great. But my life went on well and happily. Do then the same that he did both in sickness, if thou art sick, and in any other circumstances, for never to desert philosophy in any events that may befall us, nor to hold trifling talk, either with an ignorant man or with one unacquainted with nature, is a principle of all schools of philosophy. But to be intent only on that which thou art now doing, and on the instrument by which thou doest it, when thou art offended with any man's shameless conduct, immediately ask thyself, is it possible then that shameless men should not be in the world? It is not possible. Do not then require what is impossible for this man. Also is one of those shameless men who must of necessity be in the world. Let the same considerations be present to thy mind in the case of the knave and the faithless man, and of every man who does wrong in any way, for at the same time that thou dost remind thyself that it is impossible that such kind of men should not exist, that will become more kindly disposed towards everyone individually. It is useful to perceive this too immediately when the occasion arises, what virtue nature has given to man to oppose to every wrongful act, for she has given to man as an antidote against a stupid man mildness, and against another kind of man some other power. And in all cases it is possible for thee to correct by teaching the man who is gone astray, for every man who hates just misses his object and is gone astray. Besides, wherein hast thou been injured? For thou wilt find that no one among those against whom thou art irritated has done anything by which thy mind could be made worse, but that which is evil to thee and harmful has its foundation only in the mind. And what harm is done, or what is there strange if the man who has not been instructed does the acts of an uninstructed man? Consider whether thou should not rather blame thyself, because thou did not expect such a man to he in such a way, for thou hast means given thee by thy reason to suppose that it was likely that he would commit this error. And yet thou hast forgotten, and art amazed that he has heard it. But most of all, when thou, music, blame storming thy kindness, thou did not confer it absolutely, nor yet in such way as to have received from thy very act all the profit. For what more dost thou want? When thou hast done a man of service, art thou not content that thou hast done something conformable to thy nature? And dost thou seek to be paid for it, just as if the eye demanded a recompense for seeing, or the feet for walking? For as these members are formed for a particular purpose, and by working according to their several constitutions obtain what is their own, so also as man is formed by nature to acts of benevolence, when he has done anything benevolent, or in any other way conducive to the common interest, he has acted conformably to his constitution, and he gets what is his own. Music Book 10. Wilt thou then, my soul, never be good and simple, and one and naked more manifest than the body which surrounds thee? Wilt thou never enjoy an affectionate and contented disposition? Wilt thou never be full, and without a want of any kind, longing for nothing more, nor desiring anything, either animate or inanimate, for the enjoyment of pleasures, nor yet desiring time wherein thou shalt have longer enjoyment, or place, or pleasant climate, or society of men with whom thou mayest live in harmony? But wilt thou be satisfied with thy present condition, and pleased with all that is about thee? And wilt thou convince thyself that thou hast everything, and that it comes from the gods, that everything is well for thee and will be well, whatever shall please them, and whatever they shall give for the conservation of the perfect living being, the good and just and beautiful, which generates and holds together all things and contains and embraces all things which are dissolved for the production of other like things, wilt thou never be such that thou shalt so dwell in community with gods and men, as neither to find fault with them at all, nor to be condemned by them? Observe what thy nature requires, so far as thou art governed by nature. Only then do it and accept it. If thy nature, so far as thou art a living being, shall not be made worse by it. And next, thou must observe what thy nature requires, so far as thou art a living being. And all this thou mayest allow thyself. If thy nature, so far as thou art a rational animal, shall not be made worse by it, but the rational animal is consequently also a political, social animal, use these rules then, and trouble thyself about nothing else. Everything which happens either happens in such wise as thou art formed by nature to bear it, or as thou art not formed by nature to bear it. If then it happens to thee in such way as thou art formed by nature to bear it, do not complain, but bear it as thou art formed by nature to bear it. But if it happens in such wise as thou art not formed by nature to bear, it do not complain, for it will perish after it has consumed thee. Remember, however, that thou art formed by nature to bear everything with respect to which it depends on thy own opinion, to make it endurable and tolerable by thinking that it is either thy interest or thy duty to do. Music. This, if a man is mistaken, instruct him kindly, and show him his error. But if thou art not able, blame thyself, or blame not even thyself, whatever may happen to thee. It was prepared for thee from all eternity, and the implication of causes was from eternity, spinning the thread of thy being, and of that which is incident to it, whether the universe is a concourse of atoms or nature, is a system. Let this first be established, that I am a part of the whole, which is governed by nature. Next, I am in a manner intimately related to the parts which are of the same kind with myself, for remembering this, inasmuch as I am a part, I shall be discontented with none of the things which are assigned to me out of the whole, for nothing is injurious to the part, if it is for the advantage of the whole, for the whole contains nothing which is not for its advantage. And all natures indeed have this common principle. But the nature of the universe has this principle besides, that it cannot be compelled even by any external cause to generate anything harmful to itself. By remembering then that I am a part of such a whole, I shall be content with everything that happens, and inasmuch as I am in a manner intimately related to the parts which are of the same kind with myself, I shall do nothing unsocial, but I shall rather direct myself to the things which are of the same kind with myself, and I shall turn in my efforts to the common interest and divert them from the contrary. Now, if these things are done, so life must flow on happily, just as thou mayest observe that the life of a citizen is happy, who continues a course of action which is advantageous to his fellow citizens, and is content with whatever the state may assign to music him, the parts of the whole, everything I mean, which is naturally comprehended in the universe, must of necessity perish. But let this be understood in this sense, that they must undergo change. But if this is naturally both an evil and a necessity for the parts, the whole would not continue to exist in a good condition, the parts being subject to change and constituted so as to perish in various ways. For whether did nature herself design to do evil to the things which are parts of herself, and to make them subject to evil, and of necessity fall into evil, or have such results happen without her knowing it? Both these suppositions indeed are incredible. But if a man should even drop the term nature as an efficient power, and should speak of these things as natural, even then, it would be ridiculous to affirm at the same time that the parts of the whole are in their nature subject to change, and at the same time to be surprised or vexed, as if something were happening contrary to nature, particularly as the dissolution of things is into those things of which each thing is composed, for there is either a dispersion of the elements, out of which everything has been compounded, or a change from the solid to the earthy, and from the airy to the aerial, so that these parts are taken back into the universal reason, whether this at certain periods is consumed by fire or renewed by eternal changes. And do not imagine that the solid and the airy part belong to thee from the time of generation, for all this received its accretion only yesterday and the day before, as one may say, from the food and the air which is inspired. This then which has received the accretion changes not that which thy mother brought forth, but suppose that this which thy mother brought forth implicates thee very much with that other part which has the peculiar quality of change. This is nothing in fact, in the way of objection to what is music said, when thou hast assumed these names, good, modest, true, rational, a man of equanimity and magnanimous, take care that thou dost not change these names, and if thou should lose them, quickly return to them, and remember that the term rational was intended to signify a discriminating attention to every several thing, and free freedom from negligence, and that equanimity is the voluntary acceptance of the things which are assigned to thee by the common nature, and that magnanimity is the elevation of the intelligent part above the pleasurable or painful sensations of the flesh, and above that poor thing called fame and death, and all such things. If then thou maintainest thyself in the possession of these names, without desiring to be called by these names by others, thou wilt be another person, and will enter on another life, for to continue to be such as thou hast hitherto been, and to be torn in pieces and defiled in such a life, is the character of a very stupid man, and one over fond of his life, and like those half-devoured fighters with wild beasts, who, though covered with wounds and gore, still entreat to be kept to the following day, though they will be exposed in the same state to the same claws and bites. Therefore fix thyself in the possession of these few names, and if thou art able to abide in them, abide as if thou was removed to certain islands of the happy. But if thou shalt perceive that thou fallest out of them, and dost not maintain thy hold, go courageously into some nook where thou shalt maintain them, or even depart at once from life, not in passion, but with simplicity and freedom and modesty, after doing this one laudable thing, at least in thy life, to have gone out of it thus. In order, however, to the remembrance of these names, it will greatly help thee if thou rememberest the gods, and that they wish not to be flattered, but wish all reasonable beings to be made like themselves. And if thou rememberest that what does the work of a fig tree is a fig tree, and that what does the work of a dog is a dog, and that what does the work of a bee is a bee, and that what does the work of a man is a music, man, Mimi wore astonishment torpor. Slavery will daily wipe out those holy principles of thine. How many things without study in nature dost thou imagine, and how many dost thou neglect? But it is thy duty so to look on and so to do everything that at the same time the power of dealing with circumstances is perfected, and the contemplative faculty is exercised, and the confidence which comes from the knowledge of each several thing is maintained, without showing it, but yet not concealed. For when wilt thou enjoy simplicity, when gravity, and when the knowledge of every several thing, both what it is in substance, and what place it has in the universe, and how long it is formed to exist, and of what things it is compounded, and to whom it can belong, and who are able both to give it and take it away? A spider is proud when it has caught a fly, and another when he has caught a poor hare, and another when he has taken a little fish in a net, and another when he has taken wild boars, and another when he has taken bears, and another when he has taken sarmi. Are not these robbers? If thou examines their opinions, acquire the contemplative way of seeing how all things change into one another, and constantly attend to it, and exercise thyself about this part of philosophy. For nothing is so much adapted to produce magnanimity. Such a man is put off the body, and as he sees that he must, no one knows how soon go away from among men, and leave everything here, he gives himself up entirely to just doing in all his actions and in everything else that happens. He resigns himself to the universal nature, but as to what any man shall say or think about him or do against him, he never even thinks of it, being himself contented with these two things, with acting justly in what he now does, and being satisfied with what is now assigned to him, and he lays aside all distracting and busy pursuits and desires, nothing else than to accomplish the straight course through the law, and by accomplishing the straight course to follow, music. God, what need is there of suspicious fear, since it is in thy power to inquire what ought to be done, and if thou seest clear, go by this way, content without turning back. But if thou dost not see clear, stop, and take the best advices. But if any other things oppose thee, go on according to thy powers with due consideration, keeping to that which appears to be just, for it is best to reach this object. And if thou DST fail, let thy failure be in attempting this. He who follows reason in all things is both tranquil and active at the same time, and also cheerful and collected. Inquire of thyself as soon as thou wakest from sleep, whether it will make any difference to thee if another does what is just and right. It will make no difference. Though thou hast not forgotten, I suppose, that those who assume arrogant ease in bestowing their praise or blame on others are such as they are at bed and at board, and thou hast not forgotten what they do, and what they avoid, and what they pursue, and how they steal, and how they rob, not with hands and feet, but with their most valuable part, by means of which there is produced, when a man chooses fidelity, modesty, truth-law, a good demon happiness to her who gives and takes back all to nature. The man who is instructed and modest says, give what thou wilt, take back what thou wilt. And he says this not proudly, but obediently, and well pleased with her. Short is the little which remains to thee of life. Live as on a mountain, for it makes no difference whether a man lives there or here. If he lives everywhere in the world, as in a state, let men see, let them know a real man who lives according to nature. If they cannot endure him, let them kill him. For that is better than to live thus, as men do no longer talk at all about the kind of man that a good man ought to be, but be such constantly contemplate the whole of time and the whole of substance, and consider that all individual things as to substance are a grain of a fig, and as to time the turning of a gimlet. Look at everything that exists, and observe that it is already in dissolution and in change, and as it were putrefaction, or dispersion, or that everything is so constituted by nature as to die. Consider what men are when they are eating, sleeping, generating, easing themselves, and so forth. Then what kind of men they are when they are imperious and arrogant, or angry and scolding from their elevated place. But a short time ago to how many? They were slaves, and for what things? And after a little time, consider in what a condition they will, music, be, that is for the good of each thing which the universal nature brings to each, and it is for its good. At the time when nature brings it, the earth loves the shower, and the solemn ether loves, and the universe loves to make whatever is about to be. I say then to the universe that I love as thou lovest. And is not this too said, that this or that loves is to be produced? Either thou livest here, and hast already accustomed thyself to it, or thou art going away, and this was thy own will, or thou art dying, and hast discharged thy duty. But besides these things, there is nothing. Be of good cheer. Music, then let this always be plain to thee, that this piece of land is like any other, and that all things here are the same, with things on top of a mountain or on the seashore or wherever thou choosest to be. For thou wilt find just what Plato says, dwelling within the walls of a city, as in a shepherd's fold on a mountain. What is my ruling faculty now to me, and of what nature am I now making it? And for what purpose am I now using it? Is it void of understanding? Is it loosed and rent asunder from social life? Is it melted into and mixed with the poor flesh, so to move together with it? He who flies from his master is a runaway, but the law is master, and he who breaks the law is a runaway. And he also who is grieved or angry or afraid is dissatisfied, because something has been or is or shall be of the things which are appointed by him who rules all things, and he is law and assigns to every man what is fit. He then who fears or is grieved or is angry is a runaway, a man, deposits seed in a womb and goes away. And then another cause takes it and labors on it, and makes a child. What a thing from such a material! Again, the child passes food down through the throat. Then another cause takes it and makes perception and motion and inane life and strength and other things. How many and how strange! Observe then the things which are produced in such a hidden way, and see the power just as we see the power which carries things downwards and upwards, not with the eyes, but still no less plainly. Constantly consider how all things such as they now are in time past also were, and consider that they will be the same again, and place before thy eyes entire dramas and stages of the same form.